Have you ever wondered what happens when history throws us a curveball? When the past reveals something so unexpected, it challenges everything we thought we knew. Picture this: deep in the earth, covered by layers of time and dust, an archaeologist's brush uncovers an object that shouldn't exist, a technological marvel far ahead of its time, a skeleton that defies known human evolution, or an artifact that hints at lost civilizations with knowledge we're only now beginning to grasp. These aren't just rare occurrences, they are moments that rewrite textbooks, shake the foundations of science, and leave even the most seasoned experts utterly speechless. Today, we're embarking on a journey to explore 30 of these impossible discoveries, each one more baffling and awe-inspiring than the last. From the depths of forgotten tombs to the heart of ancient ruins, these findings don't just tell a story, they tell a story we never knew was possible. Imagine holding a 2,000-year-old device that accurately predicts astronomical events with precision we wouldn't achieve for centuries, or stumbling upon footprints fossilized in rock that date back millions of years, yet match modern human feet perfectly. These aren't plot twists from a science fiction novel, they are real, documented, and waiting for us to unravel their secrets. It's a reminder that our understanding of history is not set in stone. It's a living, breathing puzzle, and every now and then, a piece surfaces that forces us to reconsider everything. This video is your invitation to step into that world of wonder, to walk alongside those who have uncovered the unimaginable, and to feel the thrill of discovery for yourself. We'll venture across continents and epochs, from the pyramids of Egypt to the jungles of South America, exploring finds that continue to mystify and inspire. So settle in, open your mind, and get ready to question what you thought was possible, because by the end of this journey, you'll see that sometimes the most incredible stories aren't the ones we've been told, but the ones we're still uncovering. Our journey into the impossible begins not in a dusty desert tomb, but at the bottom of the sea, where a storm in the year 1901 forced a crew of sponge divers off the coast of a small Greek island called Antikythera. Seeking shelter, they made a decision that would change history, diving into the deep waters and stumbling upon the silken remains of an ancient Roman-era shipwreck. Among the broken amphorae and statues encrusted with centuries of marine growth, they recovered a lump of corroded bronze and wood that seemed entirely unremarkable. For nearly half a century, it sat in the back rooms of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, labeled as a piece of a statue or perhaps a simple navigational astrolabe, a curious but ultimately forgettable artifact. It wasn't until the 1950s that a researcher named Derek J. Dusola Price took a closer look, and what he discovered would send shockwaves through the scientific community. This wasn't a simple lump of metal. Through painstaking work, including early X-ray analysis, it was revealed to be the most sophisticated technological device from the ancient world ever discovered. We now call it the Antikythera Mechanism, and it has been called the world's first analog computer. Imagine a device roughly the size of a shoebox, housed in a wooden case with bronze dials on the front and back, operated by a hand crank. Inside was a breathtakingly complex clockwork of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut with such precision they could mesh perfectly with others. This intricate system of gears, more akin to an 18th century Swiss watch than anything from the classical era, was designed to model the cosmos itself. The mechanism was a portable, hand-powered planetarium. By turning the crank, an ancient user could calculate the movements of the sun, the moon, and likely the 5 known planets across the zodiac. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, not just telling you when one would occur, but the color and direction of the shadow, information steeped in both scientific and astrological significance for the time. One dial even tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. The real impossibility lies in its timing. This device was constructed sometime between 250 and 100 years before the Common Era. Technology of this mechanical complexity simply should not have existed for another 1,400 years. Every known historical record suggested that geared devices of this nature did not appear until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. The Antikythera Mechanism single-handedly rewrote our understanding of ancient Greek engineering and astronomical knowledge. It proves they had a far more advanced grasp of mathematics, metallurgy, and mechanical engineering than we ever gave them credit for. It stands as a haunting reminder that history is not a linear path of progress, but a story with peaks and valleys where brilliant knowledge can be lost to time, waiting for the sea itself to give it back. If the Antikythera Mechanism represents a sophisticated computer lost to time, our next find suggests the ancients might have been playing with raw power itself. In 1936, during excavations near the village of Kujat Rabu just outside Baghdad, Iraqi workers uncovered an ancient tomb from the Parthian period, dating back roughly 2,000 years. Among the typical finds of pottery and burial artifacts was a collection of a dozen rather peculiar clay jars. Each was about 5 inches tall, with a 1.5-inch mouth that had been sealed with asphalt or bitumen. This stopper was no simple lid. It was carefully pierced through the center. Inside each jar, suspended from that asphalt plug, was a rolled copper sheet housing a single iron rod. The iron rod was isolated from the copper by the plug, but if the jar were filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the two metals would be immersed in the same electrolyte solution. To Wilhelm Koenig, the German archaeologist who first studied them in depth, the arrangement was unmistakably familiar. It looked exactly like a simple galvanic cell, the basic component of a battery. The principle is straightforward chemistry. The two dissimilar metals, copper and iron, react with the acidic electrolyte to produce a small electrical charge. The copper acts as the positive terminal, the iron as the negative. When Koenig replicated the device using a jar filled with grape juice, he managed to generate a small but measurable voltage around 1.5 to 2 volts. The implications were staggering. If these were indeed batteries, their creation predated the official invention of the electrochemical cell by Alessandro Volta in the year 1800 by over a millennium and a half. This is where the debate ignites, a fiery discussion that continues to this very day. What on earth would the Parthians or the later Sasanians, who also occupied the region, have needed a small electrical current for? The most popular and tantalizing theory involves electroplating. The region is known for its exquisite artisanal work, including items where thin layers of gold or silver were applied to other metals. The process of electroplating, which uses an electrical current to bind a layer of precious metal onto a base object, would perfectly explain a practical use for these cells. Some experiments have even shown that linking several of these Baghdad batteries together in a series could produce enough voltage to accomplish this task, creating a glimmering, gilded surface on a small object. Skeptics, however, offer more mundane explanations. They propose the jars were simply secure storage containers for important religious or magical scrolls, perhaps made of expensive papyrus or parchment. The iron rod would have been a core to roll the scroll around, and the asphalt seal was just a way to keep the contents safe and dry from the elements. The fact that no wires or conductors have ever been found alongside the jars is a frequent point raised against the battery theory. Furthermore, the complete absence of any contemporary descriptions or illustrations of such technology being used is a significant historical hurdle. Yet, the sheer coincidence of the design is difficult to ignore. The specific combination of two different metals and an acidic electrolyte is precisely what is needed to create a current. Whether they were truly ancient batteries or not, these unassuming clay pots force us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. They stand as a quiet, enigmatic challenge from the past, a whisper that perhaps we have underestimated the experimental curiosity of our ancestors. Maybe they were dabbling with forces they didn't fully understand for purposes that remain just beyond our grasp, leaving behind only these mysterious vessels as a clue to their forgotten ingenuity. Leaving behind the enigmatic technology of potential ancient batteries, we now turn to a mystery made of vellum and ink, a puzzle that has defied every attempt to solve it for over a century. In the year 1912, a Polish-American book dealer named Wilfred Voynich was combing through a chest of ancient manuscripts at the Villa Mondragon, a Jesuit college in Italy. There he uncovered what would become the most infamous unreadable book in the world, the Voynich Manuscript. This wasn't just an old text, it was a complete anomaly. A codex of about 240 vellum pages, filled from edge to edge with a flowing, unknown script written in an alphabet that doesn't match any known language. But the text is only half the mystery. The pages are lavishly illustrated with bizarre, unsettling, and sometimes beautiful drawings that only deepen the confusion. The illustrations are divided into sections that seem thematic, yet make no logical sense to modern eyes. One section is filled with unidentifiable plants, lush and detailed but bearing no resemblance to any known botanical species on Earth. Their roots are strange, their leaves oddly shaped, and they seem to belong to a biology from another world. Another section is dedicated to astronomy, depicting circular charts of the cosmos with suns, moons, and stars arranged in constellations we don't recognize, suggesting a completely different understanding of the heavens. Then there are the biological sections, which are perhaps the most peculiar, showing intricate diagrams of tiny, hairless, nude women, often called nymphs, bathing in or connecting to a complex network of green, tub-like systems that look vaguely like an abstract diagram of bodily organs. The final sections include what appear to be pharmaceutical recipes with drawings of jars and containers, and a series of continuous text that might be a grand summation or conclusion, devoid of any illustrations at all. For over 100 years, the world's top cryptographers, linguists, historians, and even code-breaking teams from both world wars have tried to crack the Voynich code. Their complete and total failure is what makes this book so impossible. The text itself exhibits a statistical structure that mirrors natural language. It's not random gibberish. Words follow patterns, characters have frequencies, and it possesses an internal consistency that suggests it was written to convey real information, and yet it remains utterly impenetrable. This has led to a whirlwind of theories, each more fascinating than the last. One prominent idea is that it's a sophisticated hoax, crafted to defraud a wealthy patron like Emperor Rudolph II of Bohemia, who was known for his interest in the occult. The theory suggests someone like the Elizabethan mystic Edward Kelly could have created a beautiful, nonsensical book to sell as a lost work of Roger Bacon. However, modern analysis makes this difficult to sustain. The text's complex linguistic patterns would have been nearly impossible to fabricate without computers, and carbon dating has firmly placed the vellum to the early 15th century, between 1400 and 1438. Another theory posits that it is written in a genuine but extinct language, one that has been lost to history and left no other trace, perhaps using a unique invented alphabet to transcribe it. Others believe it is a very specific type of cipher, one that encodes a known language like Latin or a vernacular tongue through an elaborate substitution method that no one has yet been able to reverse engineer. More exotic explanations suggest it could be the work of a lone, brilliant natural philosopher attempting to record a personal vision or a system of knowledge so advanced or so alien that its context is completely lost to us. Some even point to the herbal and biological sections, wondering if it represents a form of lost proto-science or a unique philosophical system where plants, stars, and the human body are all interconnected in a way we no longer understand. The manuscript's resilience against every analytical attack, from frequency analysis to artificial intelligence, grants it an almost supernatural aura. It sits in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, a silent, beautiful, and profoundly frustrating challenge from the past. It is a stark reminder that the written word, our primary tool for preserving knowledge, can itself become the ultimate lockbox, guarding its secrets across the centuries and daring us to prove we are as clever as we think we are. While the Voynich Manuscript presents a mystery of intricate detail locked within the confines of a book, our next discovery is an enigma written on an almost unimaginable scale, a canvas so vast it can only be comprehended from the heavens. Shift your focus from the libraries of Europe to the stark, arid plains of southern Peru. Here, spread across approximately 1,000 square kilometers of the Nazca Desert, lies one of archaeology's most breathtaking and perplexing sites, the Nazca Lines. These are not just simple drawings, they are massive geoglyphs, giant designs etched into the earth by the ancient Nazca people, who inhabited the region from around 500 years before the Common Era to 500 years after. The method of their creation seems deceptively simple. By removing the top layer of dark, sun-baked stones and pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored sand beneath, the Nazca created stark, contrasting lines that have been preserved for millennia by the region's unique climate, one of the driest on Earth, with virtually no rain or wind to erode them. The sheer diversity of these designs is staggering. Some are straight lines, perfectly geometric and stretching for miles across the desert floor, crisscrossing one another in a vast, seemingly chaotic network. Others are enormous geometric shapes, immense triangles, trapezoids, and spirals that look like ancient runways or ceremonial platforms. But the most famous and captivating are the figurative drawings. These include a monkey with an elaborately coiled tail, a colossal spider, a hummingbird, a condor with wings outstretched, a pelican, and even a strange humanoid figure nicknamed the astronaut, who appears to be waving. The scale is what defies belief. The hummingbird is over 300 feet long. The pelican stretches to nearly 900 feet. These are not figures you can appreciate from the ground. Standing beside them, you would simply see a shallow groove in the earth. Their true form, their breathtaking artistry and precision, is only visible from the air, from a vantage point the Nazca culture itself could never have achieved. This single, undeniable fact is the heart of the mystery and the source of endless speculation. So why were they built? The most widely accepted archaeological theories point to a deep religious or astronomical significance. The lines may have been sacred paths walked during rituals to plead with the deities for water, the most precious and scarce resource in the desert. The animal figures likely represented constellations in the night sky or spirit animals central to their cosmology. Researchers like Piri Reis, who dedicated her life to studying the lines, proposed that they functioned as a giant astronomical calendar, with key lines pointing to the rising and setting of the sun, moon, and stars during solstices and other significant celestial events, helping to mark the seasons for agricultural purposes. The act of creating and walking these lines would have been a profound communal and spiritual endeavor, a way to connect with the gods and the cosmos. However, the impossibility of viewing their own work has fueled far more extraordinary theories. In the 1960s, author Erich von Däniken popularized the idea that the lines were landing strips or navigation markers for ancient extraterrestrial visitors. This concept captured the public imagination, suggesting that the Nazca people created these giant signs to be seen by their sky gods, who traveled in advanced spacecraft. A slightly less fantastical but equally intriguing theory proposes that the ancient Nazca might have pioneered some form of human flight, perhaps using giant kites or primitive hot air balloons to ascend and view their gargantuan artwork from above. While there is no direct evidence for ancient Nazcan aviation, experiments using materials and technology available at the time have shown that it was technically possible to construct a working hot air balloon, adding a fascinating layer of plausibility to the idea. Ultimately, the Nazca Lines stand as a monumental testament to human ingenuity, patience, and the powerful drive to create meaning and connect with forces greater than ourselves. Whether they were a complex cathedral without walls, an astronomical guidebook, or something else entirely, they challenge our modern arrogance. They remind us that ancient cultures possessed sophisticated knowledge and a unique world we are still struggling to fully comprehend. They are a message from the past, written in the soil of Peru, waiting for us to find the right perspective to finally read it. But if the Nazca Lines represent a mystery of purpose and perspective, our next discovery suggests that ancient cartographers might have possessed a view of the world so accurate it borders on the clairvoyant. In the year 1929, while cataloguing artifacts in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace Library, a group of historians made a stunning find. It was a map drawn on gazelle skin parchment dating back to the year 1513. Its creator was a renowned Ottoman admiral, geographer, and cartographer named Piri Reis, who noted in the margins that he had compiled it from a multitude of source maps, including some that were captured from Spanish and Portuguese navigators, and most intriguingly, several that he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. At first glance, the map is a fascinating artifact of its time, depicting the coastlines of Western Europe, North Africa, and the Atlantic with varying degrees of accuracy. But it was the lower portion of the map that would ignite a firestorm of controversy and wonder, for it appeared to show a landmass that no 16th century European could have known, the coastline of Antarctica, and not as an icy wasteland but as a land free of ice. The implications are staggering. Modern seismic surveys have revealed the true topography of Antarctica buried beneath miles of glacial ice. The Piri Reis Map, according to some researchers, shows a striking resemblance to the Queen Maud Land coastline of Antarctica, not as it appears today, but as it would have looked thousands of years ago before it was entombed in its frozen shell. The map seems to depict fjords, inlets, and mountain ranges that align with subglacial features we've only recently been able to map with sophisticated technology. This presents an impossible historical paradox. The Antarctic continent was not officially discovered until 1820, and its coastline was not fully mapped until the mid-20th century. For a map from the 1500s to show it, and to show it without ice, suggests its source materials were based on knowledge from an ancient, advanced seafaring civilization that explored the planet in a remote epoch when Antarctica's coasts were temperate and passable, perhaps thousands of years before the rise of any known classical culture. Skeptics, of course, offer a different interpretation. They argue that the vague, unfinished southern landmass on the Piri Reis Map is simply a speculative extension of the South American coast, a common practice among cartographers of the era who filled unknown areas with guesswork. They point out that the map contains significant errors, like the misplacement of the Amazon and the omission of the Drake Passage, which would seem to undermine its reputation for hyper-accuracy. The resemblance to Antarctica, they claim, is pareidolia, the human tendency to see meaningful patterns in random shapes. They suggest the landmass could be a composite of rumored lands like the mythical Terra Australis, a hypothetical continent that appeared on many European maps of the period, included to balance the world's landmasses. Yet the defense of the map's anomalous accuracy is compelling. Admiral Reis himself wrote that he used 20 source charts, including 8 Ptolemaic maps from the Library of Alexandria, 1 Arabic map of southern Asia, and 4 recently drawn Portuguese maps of the Indian Ocean. Most crucially, he cited a map drawn by Columbus, suggesting he had access to lost knowledge from both ancient and contemporary explorers. The theory posits that these source maps, particularly the ancient ones, preserved cartographic information from a pre-glacial era, knowledge that was copied and handed down through generations of scholars until it finally found its way onto Reis's parchment. This idea, while radical, forces us to confront the possibility that our planet was mapped by a sophisticated, global maritime culture whose history was completely erased by time. A civilization whose achievements were so thoroughly lost that their very existence is now considered impossible. The Piri Reis Map remains an enigma, a tantalizing piece of evidence that sits at the crossroads of history and myth, challenging us to reconsider not only the capabilities of ancient explorers but the very timeline of human discovery itself. Leaving the contentious debate over ancient maps behind, we plunge into a mystery that is literally set in stone, an object so out of place it seems to defy the very laws of time and geology. Our journey takes us to the mountains of California in the winter of 1961. Three keen mineral collectors, Mike Mikesell, Wallace Lane, and Virginia Maxey, were prospecting near the town of Olancha, just south of the Coso Range. They were searching for interesting specimens, particularly geodes, those rough, spherical rocks that, when split open, reveal a dazzling inner cavity of crystalline structures. Mike Mikesell found one promising candidate and, thinking it was a particularly fine geode, added it to his collection for the day. Returning to his shop, he began cutting into the rock with a diamond-tipped saw, a routine process he had performed countless times before. But this time, he immediately knew something was wrong. The blade was nearly ruined, and instead of the expected hollow cavity lined with beautiful crystals like amethyst or quartz, he found something utterly baffling. At the center of this hardened rock was a perfectly circular section of a hard, white, ceramic-like material. This white cylinder was encircled by a ring of what appeared to be corroded copper, and running through the very center was a 2-millimeter thick shaft of shiny, magnetic metal. To all three discoverers, the object's identity was immediately obvious. It looked exactly like a contemporary spark plug. But this was no ordinary rock they had picked up from the surface. It was a fully formed, hard concretion that had to have taken a significant amount of time to develop around its mysterious core. The find was quickly dubbed the Coso artifact. The true impossibility of the object was revealed when it was examined by a geologist. The outer layer of the nodule was encrusted with fossilized shells and a hard layer of clay, pebbles, and what seemed to be fragments of two fossils that were identified as a crinoid stem and a gastropod shell. Based on this encrustation and the degree of hardening, the geologist estimated the entire concretion was at least 500,000 years old. This single assessment is what launched the artifact into the realm of the truly impossible. If the geologist's dating was correct, it meant this spark plug, a piece of 20th century technology, was encased in a rock that formed 500,000 years ago, a time when Homo sapiens did not yet exist, and our ancestors were likely early hominids just beginning to use simple stone tools. The implications were, and still are, mind-bending. It suggests the existence of an advanced industrial civilization in the distant past, one that possessed technology comparable to our own before vanishing without a trace. Skepticism from the scientific community was immediate and forceful. Critics argued the object was not a geode at all, but a hardened concretion of clay and minerals that had formed much more recently around a completely mundane modern object. The most plausible explanation, put forward by investigators from the Skeptical Inquirer Society, is that the artifact is a champion spark plug from the 1920s, a common type used in Model T Fords and other early automobiles. They theorized that the spark plug was discarded or lost on the ground, perhaps near a road or a mine. Over time, minerals in the soil, particularly iron oxides, began to accumulate around it in a process called concretion. This is a well-known geological phenomenon where a hard nodule forms around a central nucleus, cementing together surrounding sediment. The fossil shells and crinoid stem fragments found in the outer layer, they argue, were simply ancient fossils already present in the local soil that became incorporated into the forming concretion, giving a false impression of immense age. This process could have occurred in a matter of decades, not millennia. Despite this convincing debunking, the Coso artifact continues to hold a powerful allure for proponents of alternative history and the theory of ancient high technology or even visitation by extraterrestrials. They point to the initial geological assessment and the object's mysterious disappearance. It vanished after Wallace Lane's death in the 1980s, leaving only photographs and X-rays behind, as evidence of a cover-up or a truth too uncomfortable to accept. For them, it represents a single, tantalizing data point, an anomalous object that challenges the conventional timeline of human progress. It asks a profound and unsettling question: could a civilization rise to technological sophistication, achieve an industrial age, and then collapse so completely that all evidence of its existence, save for a few enigmatic artifacts, is erased by the relentless passage of time? The Coso artifact, whether a modern spark plug in a quickly formed rock or something far more extraordinary, serves as a permanent reminder that our understanding of the past is a story we are constantly rewriting, and sometimes the most disruptive clues are found in the most unexpected places. While the Coso artifact presents a puzzle of modern technology seemingly trapped in ancient stone, our next discovery feels even more primal and direct, a simple tool that somehow ended up in the wrong epoch entirely. The story begins in the summer of 1936 when a pair of hikers, Max Hahn and his wife, were walking along the banks of Red Creek near the town of London, Texas. They noticed a curious piece of rock with what appeared to be a piece of wood protruding from its core. Intrigued, they took it home, and years later, their son eventually cracked it open with a rock hammer, revealing the impossible object inside. It was a hammer, a classic, unmistakable tool with a wooden handle and an iron head. But this hammer wasn't lying on the surface. It was completely encased within the solid, hard nodule of rock that had formed around it. The hammer itself is unremarkable in design, measuring about 6 inches long with a head just under 1 inch in diameter. The wood of the handle is petrified, turned to stone on the outside, yet somehow retaining its original structure and even showing signs of carbonization on the inside. The iron head is of a very pure quality, showing few of the slag inclusions common in modern industrial iron, and it has a peculiar quality of being rust-resistant. The real mystery, however, is the rock that entombed it. The concretion was identified as being composed of ancient Cretaceous rock, a formation known to be over 100 million years old. This is the period when dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops roamed the Earth, a time long before any mammals, let alone humans, had evolved the capability to smelt iron and craft metal tools. If the dating is accurate, the London hammer, as it came to be known, is an artifact so profoundly out of place that it threatens to collapse our entire understanding of human technological evolution. Naturally, such a claim has been met with intense scrutiny and offers of more conventional explanations. The most common and scientifically accepted argument is that the hammer is not nearly as ancient as the rock it was found in. Geologists point out that the specific minerals in the soil around Red Creek, particularly limonite, are known to form concretions very quickly around objects. The process involves dissolved minerals precipitating out of groundwater and cementing sediment together around a nucleus, which in this case was the lost hammer. This could have happened in a matter of centuries or even decades, not millennia. The hammer itself, upon closer metallurgical analysis, is believed by skeptics to be a typical 19th century miner's or blacksmith's hammer, likely dropped or discarded in the area. The unique composition of the iron, while unusual, isn't impossible for a hand-forged tool from that era. The Cretaceous rock, in this view, is simply a red herring. The conformation process incorporated local minerals and small fossil fragments, giving the false impression that the entire nodule was a piece of ancient bedrock rather than a much younger accumulation. Yet, for those who believe the hammer is genuine evidence of an impossible past, the scientific counterarguments are not entirely satisfying. They point to analyses conducted by organizations like the Creation Evidence Museum, which has custody of the artifact, claiming that the wood handle did not show signs of having been replaced by minerals, but had instead undergone a unique process of carbonization and preservation within the stone. The fact that the iron head has not rusted significantly despite its great alleged age is also presented as anomalous. The most radical interpretation is that the hammer is a genuine relic from a pre-flood civilization, such as the mythical Atlantis or another advanced culture that existed before our current understanding of human history began. This idea, while dismissed by mainstream science, taps into a deep and enduring fascination with the possibility of cyclic time. The notion that civilizations rise and fall in great cycles, with each age forgetting the accomplishments of the last. The London hammer ultimately stands as a symbol of this epistemological struggle between mainstream science and alternative history. It is a Rorschach test in stone and iron. To a geologist, it is a fascinating but entirely natural concretion that tells a story of local chemistry. To a proponent of ancient mysteries, it is a smoking gun, a tangible piece of evidence that our history books are wrong. Its power lies not in providing definitive answers, but in posing a profound and unsettling question about the nature of evidence itself. How do we date an object that is found in a context that defies all logical chronology? And if just one such artifact were ever proven to be authentic, what would that mean for everything we think we know about our own past? The hammer remains locked in its stone cradle, a silent, stubborn challenge to the narrative of progress, waiting for the day we might finally have the tools to understand its true story. From the contested hammer encased in ancient rock, we journey now to a mystery that feels pulled straight from the pages of a science fiction novel, a tale of strange discs, an isolated mountain tribe, and a story of otherworldly contact that has captivated and confounded researchers for decades. In 1938, an expedition led by Chinese archaeologist Kai Pu-te ventured into the remote and rugged Bayan Ha Mountains on the border between China and Tibet. Their goal was to explore a series of inaccessible caves, which local legends whispered were haunted by small, gaunt beings with large heads and spindly bodies. What they found inside one particular cave system was far stranger than any ghost story. The cave walls were adorned with pictograms depicting the sun, moon, stars, and earth, all connected by lines of tiny dots like a primitive star chart. But scattered across the cavern floor, half buried in the dust of centuries, was their most perplexing discovery: hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter and 3/4 of an inch thick. At first glance, they resembled simple stone wheels, perhaps used as primitive loom weights or ritual objects. Each disc had a perfectly circular hole in its center, and radiating out from that hole to the rim was a fine, double-grooved spiral. Upon closer inspection, that groove was not a decorative pattern. It was covered in tiny, almost microscopic hieroglyphic characters, a form of writing so small and precise it would have required a magnifying glass to inscribe. The discs were taken to Beijing University for study, and for 20 years they gathered dust, a curious but unexplained anomaly. The story of the Dropa stones truly enters the realm of the impossible in 1962, when a professor named Tsum Nui allegedly managed to decipher the enigmatic script. His translation, we are told, was nothing short of astounding. The inscriptions told a harrowing tale of a spacecraft from a distant planet that crash-landed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. The survivors, a people who called themselves the Dropa, were unable to repair their ship and found themselves stranded on Earth. The local Ham tribe, fearing these strange, large-headed beings, hunted and killed many of them. The surviving Dropa took refuge in the caves and eventually tried to make peace with the Ham people. According to the professor's account, the discs were the Dropa's own recorded history of their plight and their desperate struggle to survive on an alien world. To make the story even more incredible, it was later claimed that scientific analysis determined the stones contained high concentrations of cobalt and other metallic elements, and that when tested, they vibrated at an unusual frequency, as if they once held an electrical charge. This narrative, with its compelling mix of archaeology and extraterrestrial drama, ignited a firestorm of interest in the West. However, the lack of concrete, verifiable evidence is what fuels intense and justified skepticism. The first and most glaring issue is that no one can seem to find the stones themselves. Despite numerous attempts by researchers and journalists to locate them in Chinese museums or university archives, they have never been officially produced for independent examination. The original discoverer, Kai Pu Te, is a figure shrouded in mystery with no other documented archaeological work to his name. The heroic translator, Professor Tsum Amnui, is even more problematic. Tsum Amnui is not a standard Chinese name, leading many to believe it is a fabrication. Furthermore, his earth-shattering translation was reportedly suppressed by the Beijing Academy of Prehistory, and he was forbidden from publishing his findings, a classic trope in tales of suppressed knowledge that is difficult to verify. Mainstream archaeology dismisses the Dropa stones as a complete hoax, a story that was likely cobbled together from various sources and sensationalized. Skeptics propose that the discs are likely bidiscs, a common type of jade artifact from Neolithic China, though these typically lack any form of writing. Alternatively, they could be plain stone wheels used by local tribes, with the writing simply being natural mineral veins or later scratches that were misinterpreted. The entire story, from the archaeological discovery to the translated narrative, relies on a chain of second-hand accounts, primarily popularized by German author Erich von Däniken in his 1968 book Chariots of the Gods, which championed the ancient astronaut theory. The enduring power of the Dropa stones legend lies not in its credibility as historical fact, but in its potency as a modern myth. It perfectly encapsulates the human desire to find evidence that we are not alone in the universe and that our past is far more spectacular than we currently understand. It serves as a fascinating case study in how a story can evolve from a single, unverified report into a full-blown cultural phenomenon, repeated in books, documentaries, and across the internet. Whether a deliberate fabrication, a series of misunderstandings, or the most profound archaeological cover-up of all time, the tale of the Dropa stones continues to challenge us. It asks where we draw the line between healthy skepticism and closed-mindedness, and whether some mysteries, no matter how outlandish, deserve a second look before we consign them entirely to the realm of fantasy. Shifting from tales of extraterrestrial contact and ancient hammers, we arrive at a mystery that feels both elegantly simple and deeply puzzling, an object that seems to defy its own time with the quiet grace of a gliding bird. In 1898, during the excavation of a tomb in the ancient Egyptian burial complex of Saqqara, archaeologists uncovered a small, carefully carved wooden object. Dated to approximately 200 years before the Common Era, it was catalogued simply as a bird figurine and stored away in the basement of the Cairo Museum. For decades, it was considered just that, a beautifully crafted model of a falcon or hawk, a common motif in Egyptian art symbolizing divinity and the soul's flight to the afterlife. It wasn't until the 1970s that a physician and amateur Egyptologist named Khalil Messiha took a closer look at this unassuming artifact and noticed something everyone else had missed. This was no ordinary bird. While it had the head of a bird, its wings were straight, rigid, and set at a distinct dihedral angle, unlike the downward curving wings of a bird in flight. Most strikingly, it lacked something fundamental to any avian representation: legs. Instead, it had a perfectly vertical tail fin, a feature found not on birds but on modern aircraft. This object, now famously known as the Saqqara bird, measures about 14 centimeters long with a wingspan of 18 centimeters. It's carved from sycamore wood and is incredibly lightweight. The details that captivated Messiha are precisely what make it so anomalous. That vertical tail fin is asymmetrical, slightly thicker on one side, a design element that would be completely unnecessary for a ritual object but is critical for an aircraft to counteract torque and maintain stability during flight. The wings are also shaped with an aerofoil cross-section, meaning they are thicker at the leading edge and taper toward the back, a design that generates lift by creating differential air pressure, the very principle that allows airplanes to fly. To Messiha and a growing number of aviation enthusiasts, the conclusion was inescapable. The Saqqara bird was not a model of a bird, but a scale model of a working glider. The theory posits that the ancient Egyptians, renowned for their empirical observation and engineering prowess, may have been experimenting with the principles of flight. It's not difficult to imagine a brilliant artisan or priest watching a bird glide on thermal currents and attempting to replicate its form in a way that could actually function. Perhaps it was a ceremonial object meant to symbolically carry prayers to the gods. Or more practically, it could have been a child's toy, designed to be thrown and actually glide a short distance, a sophisticated ancient version of a paper airplane. This idea was put to the test. Aerodynamicists and model builders have created precise, scaled-up replicas of the Saqqara bird. When launched, these models have proven to be remarkably stable and efficient gliders, capable of flying for significant distances with only a gentle toss. They require the addition of only one small modern component to achieve perfect flight, a horizontal stabilizer or elevator on the tail. Some proponents argue that the original artifact might have had such a stabilizer made from a perishable material like papyrus or leather that simply did not survive the millennia, leaving us with the incomplete wooden airframe. Of course, mainstream Egyptology offers a more grounded and perhaps more likely interpretation. The predominant theory is that the Saqqara bird is indeed a ritual object, most likely a ceremonial hawk adorned with a headdress that has since broken off. The vertical tail in this view is not a rudder but a representation of the bird's legs and tail, stylized according to artistic conventions of the period. It could also have served as a weather vane mounted on the mast of a sacred boat during religious processions to indicate wind direction. The absence of legs is easily explained by the fact it was meant to be mounted on a stand or a pole. Skeptics rightly point out that if the Egyptians possessed knowledge of aerodynamics advanced enough to design working gliders, we would expect to find more evidence, other models, diagrams, or textual references to flight somewhere in their vast and well-preserved artistic and written record. The fact that we have only one such object suggests it is an outlier, not a representative example of a known technology. The true power of the Saqqara bird lies in this tension between two compelling possibilities. It forces us to look at the ancient world not as a static museum exhibit, but as a dynamic place of innovation and curiosity. Whether it is a clever toy, a sacred symbol, or the world's first aircraft model, it stands as a testament to the human mind's innate drive to understand and harness the forces of nature. It challenges us to reconsider the ingenuity of our ancestors, reminding us that a spark of inspiration for flight could have ignited long before the Wright brothers ever left the ground. Imagine the scene. It's 1957, and amateur archaeologists are carefully sifting through the earth at a site known as the Goddard Farm on the coast of Maine. This was a settlement of the Penobscot Nation, a bustling trading hub active around the year 1200, long before European ships ever officially reached these shores. Among the typical finds of stone tools and pottery fragments, a team member uncovers a small, discolored metallic disc, no bigger than a thumbnail. It was catalogued and largely forgotten for nearly 2 decades, until in 1974, an expert finally took a close look and realized this unassuming little object was something astonishing. It was a silver coin, and not just any coin, it was a Norse penny minted in Norway during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre between 1067 and 1093. In an instant, this tiny artifact, now known as the main penny, launched a firestorm of debate that continues to this day, challenging the very timeline of when Europeans first set foot in the Americas. The penny itself is a fascinating piece of history. It's a Scandinavian silver penny, a type of currency known to have circulated in the 11th and 12th centuries. On one side, it bears the name of King Olaf, and on the other, a Christian cross, a symbol of the faith that was rapidly spreading through Scandinavia at the time. The fact that it was found at a well-dated Native American site in a layer of earth that hadn't been disturbed is what makes its presence so deeply puzzling. If authentic and in situ, meaning it was found exactly where it was left centuries ago, the main penny becomes one of the most tantalizing pieces of physical evidence for pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. It suggests that Norse explorers, known to have established a settlement at Elance Ox Meadows in Newfoundland around the year 1000, may have ventured much further south along the North American coast, engaging in trade with the indigenous peoples they encountered there. This is where the mystery truly deepens. How did an 11th century Norse coin end up in a 12th century Native American site in Maine? The most romantic and compelling theory is one of direct trade. We know from the Norse sagas, the epic tales of their explorations, that they spoke of a land rich in resources west of Greenland, which they called Vinland. The settlement at Elance Ox Meadows proves they had the capability to cross the North Atlantic and establish a foothold. It is entirely plausible that their expeditions ranged further south, perhaps sailing down the coast to what is now New England. There they could have met with Native American tribes, and this coin could have changed hands as part of a trade, perhaps for furs, food, or other local goods. In this scenario, the main penny isn't just a lost object. It's a token of a fleeting, face-to-face meeting between two vastly different worlds, a moment of contact that occurred nearly 500 years before Columbus. However, many archaeologists urge extreme caution, pointing to alternative explanations that, while less dramatic, are perhaps more probable. The primary counterargument is that the coin is indeed genuine and ancient, but it did not arrive in Maine through direct Norse contact in the 12th century. Instead, it could have been a much later import. Native American trade networks were incredibly vast and sophisticated, stretching across the continent. It is possible the coin was traded hand to hand over immense distances from a Norse settlement in the far north, moving slowly from tribe to tribe over generations until it finally reached Maine centuries after it was minted. An even more skeptical theory suggests the coin could have been a later accidental introduction. Perhaps it was dropped by a 19th century collector of antiquities who lived in the area, or even mixed into the soil from a nearby farmhouse that had a collection of old coins. While the excavators were confident in the integrity of their dig site, the possibility of such a modern mix-up can never be entirely ruled out. The debate surrounding the main penny is a perfect microcosm of the challenges of interpreting a single, solitary artifact. It is an outlier, a data point that doesn't fit the established narrative. For those who believe in a wider Norse exploration of North America, it is a crucial piece of the puzzle. For mainstream archaeology, which requires a preponderance of evidence, it remains an intriguing anomaly that cannot, on its own, rewrite the history books. The true significance of the main penny may never be fully settled, but its power lies in the questions it forces us to ask. It reminds us that history is rarely as simple as our textbooks make it seem, and that the past is full of unexpected connections waiting to be uncovered, one tiny silver coin at a time. Now we journey from the chilly North Atlantic to the sun-baked deserts of Peru, where a collection of stones has ignited one of the most visually stunning and contentious debates in all of archaeology. In the 1960s, a local farmer named Basilio Ashuya began selling curious stones to tourists near the town of Ica. These weren't ordinary river rocks, they were andesite, a hard, grey volcanic stone, and each one was meticulously carved with intricate scenes that seemed to defy all logic and history. The images depicted on the Ica stones are a bizarre catalogue of the impossible. There are men using telescopes to gaze at comets and star charts, surgeons performing what appear to be advanced medical procedures like organ transplants and cesarean sections. But most astonishing of all are the clear, unmistakable illustrations of humans living alongside and even riding dinosaurs. Creatures like Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and pterodactyls, which according to mainstream science, went extinct 65 million years before the first humans ever walked the Earth. The sheer volume of these stones is staggering, with estimates ranging from 15 to over 50,000 individual carved rocks. Their champion was a local physician, Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquia, who received the first one as a paperweight for his birthday and soon became utterly obsessed. He dedicated his life to collecting and interpreting them, eventually opening a private museum in Ica to house his massive collection. Dr. Cabrera developed an elaborate theory to explain their origin. He proposed they were a vast, stone-bound library created by an advanced, ancient civilization he called the Glyptolithic man. This race, he believed, possessed knowledge and technology far beyond our own and co-existed with dinosaurs, and the stones were their way of preserving their history for future generations before a global cataclysm wiped them out. The scientific community's response to these claims was swift and overwhelmingly negative. Geologists who examined the stones pointed out that the carvings showed no signs of the natural weathering or patina that should have accumulated over centuries. The etched lines appeared fresh and sharp, as if they had been made very recently. The clincher came in the 1970s when, under pressure from Peruvian authorities who arrest people for selling national heritage artifacts, Basilio Ashuya, the original source, admitted in a BBC interview that he had forged the stones himself. He explained that he would acquire the smooth river rocks, carve the designs using a dental drill, and then use a mixture of cow and chicken dung to bake them and create an artificial aged appearance to fetch a better price from tourists. He even demonstrated his technique for journalists, showing how he copied the fantastical designs from comic books, textbooks, and popular magazines. With such a clear confession, the case should have been closed, yet the fascination with the Ica stones refuses to die. Why do they continue to captivate the public imagination despite being so thoroughly debunked? Proponents of their authenticity offer counterarguments to the hoax claim. They question how a single, uneducated farmer could have produced tens of thousands of such detailed carvings, many with anatomically correct dinosaurs, without ever making a mistake. They also point to stones that were allegedly discovered in pre-colonial burial mounds, suggesting some might be genuine ancient artifacts that the farmer simply mimicked to meet tourist demand. Dr. Cabrera himself never wavered in his belief, arguing that the farmer's confession was given under duress to avoid jail time, and that the sheer complexity and consistency of the iconography across thousands of stones pointed to a genuine ancient effort. The enduring power of the Ica stones lies less in their factual authenticity and more in what they represent, a deep human desire to find evidence that challenges the established narrative. They tap into popular theories of ancient astronauts, lost civilizations like Atlantis, and the idea of a much more complex and mysterious human past. They are a Rorschach test. To a scientist, they are a well-documented modern hoax, a lesson in the perils of confirmation bias. To a believer, they are proof of a grand conspiracy to suppress a truth that is too revolutionary for the academic world to accept. They stand as a permanent monument to the tension between institutional authority and alternative history, reminding us that sometimes the most compelling stories are not about what is true, but about why we so desperately want them to be. Deep in the remote mountains of Qinghai Province in China, near the desolate shores of Lake Tossen, sits a mystery that seems to defy both natural geology and human history. This is the location of the Bagong pipes, a collection of strange, rusty iron tubes that have become one of modern archaeology's most perplexing enigmas. The story entered the public consciousness in the late 1990s, brought to light by a local journalist investigating reports from a group of American researchers who were drawn to the area by its peculiar magnetic anomalies. What they found on Mount Bagong was a site that has fueled speculation ever since, a crumbling, pyramid-like structure, and protruding from its interior and the nearby lakebed, a network of metal pipes of various diameters running deep into the solid rock of the mountain itself. The pipes are not simply lying on the surface, they are fully integrated into the geology, appearing to have been there for an impossibly long time. They range in size, with some as narrow as a toothpick and others approaching 16 inches in diameter, and they are scattered across 3 distinct sites. The most famous is a cave within the pyramid-shaped rock formation, where a large pipe nearly 16 inches across runs from the cave's ceiling deep into the ground below, with another pipe of identical size emerging from the cave floor. A second set of pipes is found at the shore of the nearby saltwater Lake Tossen, and a third group is situated in the lake itself, jutting out of the water like the decaying remnants of some ancient industrial plumbing system. The immediate and most baffling question is who or what could have installed this metallic infrastructure in such a remote and inhospitable location, and when. Initial analysis of the pipes only deepened the mystery. Samples were sent to a smelter in the city of Liuzhou for testing. The results showed the pipes were primarily composed of iron, with significant amounts of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide. Surprisingly, 30% of the material could not be identified. Even more startling was the reported age. Using a technique called thermoluminescence dating, which measures the amount of accumulated radiation in a material to determine how long it has been buried, Chinese scientists from the Beijing Institute of Geology reportedly estimated the pipes to be around 150,000 years old. If accurate, this date is staggering. It would place the construction of these pipes firmly in the Middle Paleolithic era, a time when Homo sapiens were only just beginning to migrate out of Africa, and the most sophisticated technology on Earth was a carefully crafted flint hand axe. The idea of an iron-smelting, pipe-laying civilization from this epoch is, by all conventional standards, utterly impossible. Faced with such an anomaly, geologists have proposed a far more natural, albeit still fascinating, explanation. They suggest the Bagong pipes are not pipes at all, but incredibly rare and well-formed examples of what are known as iron oxide concretions or fulgurites. These peculiar structures can form through 2 primary natural processes. The first involves the precipitation of minerals from groundwater. Over immense spans of time, water rich in dissolved iron can seep through porous rock. As the water flows, the iron can precipitate out and cement surrounding sediments together, forming tube-like structures that follow the path of the ancient water flow. The second process involves lightning strikes. When a powerful bolt of lightning hits sandy, iron-rich soil, the immense heat can instantaneously fuse the sand and minerals into a glassy, hollow tube called a fulgurite. Proponents of this theory argue that the peculiar shapes and hollow centers of the Bagong formations are simply a fantastic quirk of nature, a result of perfect geological conditions over hundreds of thousands of years. However, for those who look at the symmetrical placement, the varied diameters, and the seemingly organized nature of the structures, the natural explanation feels insufficient. The site's location on a mountain with a peculiar shape near a saltwater lake has led to more extraordinary speculation. Could this be the remains of an ancient launching pad or energy facility built by a highly advanced pre-human civilization that has since vanished without a trace? The concept of a lost civilization, perhaps one that was wiped out by a global cataclysm like the Great Flood described in myriad ancient myths, offers a tantalizing narrative. Even more popular is the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Perhaps the pipes are the crumbling infrastructure of an ancient alien outpost, a refueling station or a planetary monitoring post that was abandoned millennia ago. The remote location and the presence of a saltwater lake, which could potentially be used as a source of fuel or coolant, adds a layer of science fiction plausibility that continues to capture the imagination. The debate over the Bagong pipes is a classic clash between established scientific processes and the allure of the unknown. While the natural concretion theory is the most academically accepted, the lack of widespread, independent testing and the mysterious reported age keep the door open for doubt and wonder. The site remains difficult to access, and comprehensive, peer-reviewed studies are scarce, allowing the mystery to persist. Whether a stunning geological formation we are only just beginning to understand or the crumbling testament to a forgotten chapter in Earth's history, the Bagong pipes serve as a powerful reminder that our planet still holds secrets that challenge our understanding of time, technology, and our own place in the cosmic story. Yet another discovery that challenges our perception of history shifts our focus from mysterious pipes to a single piece of linen that has become perhaps the most studied and debated artifact in the entire world. Housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, the shroud is a 14-foot-long, 3.5-foot-wide piece of cloth that bears the faint front and back imprint of a crucified man, complete with wounds that eerily correspond to the biblical accounts of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The image is a subtle, sepia-toned negative, meaning it only appears with full clarity when viewed as a photographic negative, a fact that wasn't discovered until the advent of photography in 1898. This single characteristic transformed the shroud from an object of veneration into a global scientific puzzle, launching a quest to determine whether this could truly be the sacred burial cloth of Christ or an elaborate medieval hoax that has fooled millions for centuries. The history of the shroud prior to the mid-14th century is shrouded in its own mystery, a gap that fuels much of the skepticism surrounding it. Its documented history begins definitively in 1354, when it appeared in the possession of a French knight, Geoffroy de Charny, in the town of Liéry. It was displayed as the authentic burial shroud and quickly attracted both pilgrims and accusations of fraud. A local bishop even declared it a clever painting, a claim that prompted its temporary removal from public view. It changed hands among European nobility for centuries before coming to rest in Turin in 1578, where it has remained, surviving a devastating chapel fire in 1997 that threatened to destroy it. Proponents of its authenticity, however, argue for a much longer history, pointing to possible earlier references. Some suggest it is the same cloth known as the image of Edessa or the Mandylion, a legendary cloth bearing the face of Jesus that was said to have been used to heal a king. This theory posits that the full-length shroud was folded and presented only as a face cloth for centuries, explaining its absence from earlier clear historical records. The central and most contentious chapter in the shroud story began in the 1980s, driven by the desire for a definitive scientific verdict. In 1988, with the permission of the Vatican, a small sample from a corner of the shroud was divided and sent to 3 independent laboratories at the University of Arizona, Oxford University, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology for radiocarbon dating. The results, published in the journal Nature, were seemingly conclusive. The linen flax used to weave the shroud dated between 1260 and 1390. For much of the scientific community, this was the final word. The shroud was a medieval creation, an astonishingly clever fake from the very era that saw a booming trade in religious relics. But rather than ending the debate, the carbon dating results ignited a new firestorm of controversy that continues to burn. critics of the study pointed to a multitude of issues that they believe invalidate the medieval date. The sample taken was from a corner of the cloth, an area that could have been damaged by the fire of 1592 and subsequently repaired by skilled nuns using a technique called invisible reweaving, which would have introduced newer carbon into the tested sample. Furthermore, studies of pollen grains found on the shroud identified species native not to Europe, but to the Middle East, specifically the area around Jerusalem, suggesting a much older and distant origin. Textile experts have also noted that the cloth's complex herringbone twill weave was known in the 1st century but was uncommon in medieval Europe, adding another layer of complexity to its provenance. The most perplexing scientific question remains the one at the very heart of the mystery. How was the image created? The imprint is not a painting. No pigments, dyes, or brushstrokes have been found on the fibers. The color resides only on the very topmost micron of the threads, a depth impossible to achieve with any known artistic technique from any era. The image has three-dimensional information encoded within it, a property no painting or drawing possesses. Some researchers have proposed that the image was formed by a sudden, intense burst of radiation, a theory that, while highly speculative, aligns with the faint, superficial nature of the imprint and remains the only hypothesis that has not been definitively ruled out by experimentation. For many believers, this points to the moment of resurrection, a divine event that left a miraculous, photographic-like imprint on the cloth. Today, the Shroud of Turin exists in a unique space between faith and science, a sacred object for millions and an unsolved anomaly for researchers. It is a Rorschach test for the human mind. To a skeptic, it is a masterpiece of medieval ingenuity, a profound testament to the artistic and entrepreneurial spirit of the time. To a believer, it is a tangible connection to the central event of their faith, a relic that has withstood centuries of scrutiny. The ongoing debate ensures its status as an impossible discovery, not because it defies the laws of physics, but because it so perfectly captures the eternal human struggle to find proof of the divine, a search for answers that lies just beyond the reach of our most advanced technology. High in the Andes, overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, lies a fortress that defies not only time but the very logic of construction itself. This is Sacsayhuamán, a sprawling complex of colossal stone walls whose scale and precision are so staggering that they have fueled centuries of debate and wonder. The most awe-inspiring section is a series of 3 zigzagging terraced walls, built like a titanic set of teeth biting into the mountainside. They are constructed from enormous blocks of limestone and andesite, some weighing well over 100 tons, as much as a full-grown blue whale. The real miracle, however, is not their size but their fit. These monstrous stones are carved with a complexity of angles that would challenge a modern architect with laser tools, yet they are fitted together so perfectly that you cannot slip a single piece of paper between them. This impeccable masonry was achieved without a single drop of mortar, without the wheel, and without iron tools, standing defiantly for over 5 centuries in one of the most seismically active regions on the planet. So how did the Inca accomplish this impossible feat of engineering? Mainstream archaeology provides a compelling, labor-intensive explanation rooted in remarkable human skill. The prevailing theory is that stones were quarried miles away using harder stones as hammers and bronze bars as chisels. To transport these multi-ton behemoths, it's believed they were dragged on rolling log levers by thousands of workers using ropes made from leather and plant fibers. The final, most mysterious step was the shaping. The most accepted method is the guess and check technique. Workers would have meticulously pounded and abraded the stone against its neighbor, repeatedly lifting and lowering the block with levers and log rollers, slowly grinding it down until the fit was flawless. This theory is supported by the discovery of numerous sibling stones found in quarries, partially carved blocks that seem to match the negative space of stones already in place at the site, suggesting a method of trial and error that required immense patience and spatial reasoning. Yet the perfection of Sacsayhuamán has also inspired more speculative theories that question whether we have the full story. The smooth, almost melted appearance of some stones, the intricate, puzzle-like interlocking, and the incredible precision have led some to propose the Inca inherited this site from a far older, more advanced civilization. Others suggest they possessed a lost technology, perhaps a plant-based solvent that could temporarily soften stone to a clay-like consistency, allowing them to mold it into place. While there is no archaeological evidence for such a substance, the theory persists because it offers a seemingly simpler solution to an otherwise almost superhuman endeavor. These ideas, while outside academic consensus, speak to the profound awe the site inspires, a feeling that such perfection must require a secret we have yet to uncover. The ultimate proof of the builder's genius, however, is not in how the walls were built, but in how they have endured. Peru is a land violently shaped by earthquakes, and the city of Cusco below has been shaken and shattered numerous times over the centuries. Yet the walls of Sacsayhuamán have never fallen. Their resilience is a direct result of their impossible construction. The mortar-free, interlocking fit gives the entire structure a flexibility that rigid, mortared walls lack. When an earthquake strikes, the stones in the wall are designed to dance. They shudder, shift, and settle back into place once the tremors pass. A mortared wall would crack and collapse under the same stress, but these ancient engineers built with an intuitive understanding of seismic activity, creating a structure that moves with the earth rather than fighting against it. They are a masterclass in anti-seismic engineering, a lesson carved in stone half a millennium before modern science understood the principles. Standing before these walls, one is left with a humbling sense of admiration. Whether the product of immense communal effort and painstaking trial and error, or a fragment of knowledge now lost to time, Sacsayhuamán represents a peak of pre-Columbian achievement. It is a monument that speaks to the power of human cooperation, ingenuity, and a profound connection to the natural world. The stones do not simply sit on the land, they converse with it, a dialogue between mountain and mason that has withstood every test the earth could muster. They ask us to reconsider what ancient cultures were truly capable of, not with alien intervention, but with the brilliant application of observation, patience, and an unwavering will to create something eternal. Just when we think we have the story of human civilization neatly mapped out, a discovery emerges from the earth that unravels the entire narrative. This brings us to a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, a place known locally as Göbekli Tepe, which translates to Potbelly Hill. For centuries, it was written off as little more than a medieval burial ground, a place of minor interest. That all changed in 1994 when a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt, working with the Schindlerhofer Museum, decided to take a closer look. What he and his team began to uncover would not just rewrite history, it would tear up the first chapter entirely. They found not a simple graveyard, but the carved tops of massive, T-shaped stone pillars arranged in great circles, buried intentionally under thousands of tons of soil. As they excavated further, the true scale of the site began to emerge, revealing a temple complex of staggering sophistication, but its age was the true shock. Radiocarbon dating of organic material found in the filled dirt placed its construction at approximately 9,600 years before the Common Era. This means Göbekli Tepe is an astonishing 12,000 years old, a date that places it firmly in the pre-pottery Neolithic period, a time archaeologists had previously considered the dawn of the Stone Age, when humans were mere hunter-gatherers living in small, nomadic bands. The architecture itself is a profound mystery. The site is composed of multiple enclosures, each a circular arrangement of these massive T-shaped limestone pillars. The largest of these pillars stand over 18 feet tall and weigh an estimated 16 tons. Quarrying, shaping, and transporting these monoliths would have been a Herculean task, requiring a highly organized labor force and a level of planning we never attributed to people of this era. The pillars are not blank, they are covered in elaborate, finely carved reliefs. These are not crude scratches, they are intricate depictions of animals, foxes, gazelles, scorpions, lions, and vultures rendered with an artistic skill and confidence that is breathtaking. The animals are dynamic, often shown in aggressive or powerful poses. Some pillars also feature abstract symbols, and a few even have carved arms and hands, suggesting the T-shapes are highly stylized representations of human beings, perhaps ancestors or powerful deities, watching over the rituals performed within these sacred circles. This is where Göbekli Tepe delivers its most earth-shattering blow to conventional history. For over a century, the accepted model of human development was a linear one. The story went like this. First, humans learned to farm during the Neolithic Revolution. Agriculture produced a food surplus which allowed people to settle down in permanent villages. This settled life led to population growth, social stratification, and specialization of labor. It was only after all of this, the theory held, that humans had the time, resources, and complex social organization necessary to embark on massive communal projects like building temples. Göbekli Tepe turns this sequence completely on its head. It was built before agriculture, it was built before permanent settlement, it was built by hunter-gatherers. This forces a revolutionary question. What if it wasn't farming that led to religion and complex society, but the other way around? What if the human impulse to come together for a common spiritual purpose was the very catalyst that sparked civilization itself? The implications of this are staggering. The building of Göbekli Tepe would have required feeding a large, non-food producing workforce. This necessity could have been the primary pressure that forced people to deliberately cultivate wild grains and manage herds of animals, essentially inventing agriculture out of a need to sustain the temple builders. Furthermore, the knowledge required to construct such a place, advanced stoneworking, architectural design, and perhaps even early forms of astronomy, as some pillars seem to be aligned with celestial bodies, suggests that pre-agricultural societies were far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. They possessed a complex symbolic world and a capacity for large-scale cooperation that we are only now beginning to appreciate. Then, around 8000 BCE, something just as mysterious happened. The entire site was deliberately and carefully buried under vast quantities of soil, preserving it perfectly for millennia. We may never know why. Was it a ritual entombment? Was it to protect the sacred site from invading new ideas? Its burial is a final, silent mystery from a world we are only just beginning to hear. Göbekli Tepe stands as a monumental puzzle, a stone-built question mark that challenges the very core of who we are and how we came to be. It suggests that the seeds of civilization were sown not in the fields, but in the human mind, in a shared desire to reach for something greater than ourselves. Moving from the revolutionary hunter-gatherer temple of Göbekli Tepe, we now travel to a very different kind of sacred space, one where the mysteries are not buried in the earth but carved in plain sight upon the walls. Our journey takes us to the temple complex of Dendera, dedicated to the goddess Hathor, one of the most important and beautifully preserved sites from ancient Egypt. Among its many chambers and crypts, one specific relief has become the center of a fierce and fascinating debate, a carving that to some appears to be a startling anachronism, a functioning light bulb. Located in a subterranean crypt, a place reserved for the most sacred and secretive rituals, the relief in question is part of a larger series of images. It depicts a scene that is undeniably strange. Two large figures are shown holding up what looks like a giant, elongated pear-shaped object, often described as a bulb or lamp. Inside this bulb, a snake stretches the entire length, its head pointing toward the narrower end. This snake is held aloft by a standing figure of a god, often identified as the pillar deity Hair, using what appear to be insulating rods. The bulb itself is connected by a cable to a box on which a kneeling god is resting, and next to this box stands a two-faced god, the deity of the air and atmosphere, who seems to be acting as a generator or power source. To a modern eye, the resemblance to an electrical apparatus is uncanny. The giant bulb, the filament represented by the snake, the cables, and the generator box, it all seems to form a coherent system for producing light. This interpretation, popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken, suggests the ancient Egyptians may have possessed, or at least understood, the principles of electrical illumination. Proponents of this theory ask a simple but compelling question. How did the Egyptians achieve such incredible precision in their art and architecture, particularly in the deep, pitch-black interiors of tombs and pyramids, without a strong, steady, and portable light source? The sooty residue from torches or oil lamps would have damaged the exquisite paintings, and the flickering light would have been insufficient for the delicate work performed. The dendrolite offers a tantalizing solution, a form of ancient electric lighting, perhaps based on a primitive form of a Crookes tube or arc lamp, that provided a clean, bright light, allowing artists to work in the darkness without damaging the air or the art. The snake writhing in the bulb is seen as a brilliant representation of an electrical arc or filament, a symbol any ancient priest would recognize as the essence of this sacred, illuminating power. Mainstream Egyptology, however, offers a very different and far more established interpretation of this scene. Scholars point out that the relief is surrounded by other, very clearly mythological imagery and is accompanied by hieroglyphic text. The traditional explanation is that this is a symbolic representation of a foundational Egyptian creation myth. The bulb is not a light bulb at all, but the womb of the sky goddess Nut from which all life emerges. The snake is not a filament, but the god Harsomptus, a manifestation of the sun god, who is being born or presented to the world. In this reading, the entire scene is a cosmogram, a map of the universe according to Egyptian belief. The standing god is supporting the celestial serpent as it travels through the heavenly ocean of Nut's womb, an event that happens each night and culminates in the rebirth of the sun at dawn. The cable is a lotus stem, a common symbol of creation and rebirth, and the generator box is actually a jed pillar, a symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The two-faced god is most likely Shu, the god of air who separates the sky from the earth, a perfectly fitting deity for a scene about the creation of the cosmic order. This orthodox view is supported by the context. The crypt where this relief is found was a place for rituals concerning the cyclical renewal of the world and the resurrection of Osiris. The imagery is about the magical and spiritual generation of life and light, not the technological generation of electricity. The Egyptians were masters of symbolic language, and to interpret their art literally is to miss the profound metaphysical meaning they intended to convey. The tools they used for lighting were indeed simple. Oil lamps, wicks, and reflective mirrors have all been found in archaeological contexts, proving they had practical, if rudimentary, means to combat the darkness. The debate over the Dendera relief is a classic clash between a literal, modern interpretation and a symbolic, ancient one. It pits our tendency to see the past through the lens of our own technology against the need to understand the past on its own terms. The light bulb theory satisfies a deep desire to find lost technology and evidence of advanced ancient knowledge, making the past feel more mysterious and exciting. The mythological explanation, while less sensational, is rooted in decades of scholarly work deciphering a complex religious system. It asks us to appreciate a different kind of brilliance, not electrical engineering, but a sophisticated cosmological understanding expressed through powerful and enduring art. The carving at Dendera does not depict a secret technology, but something perhaps even more magical, an ancient civilization's profound attempt to explain the very nature of life, light, and the universe itself, forever frozen in stone. Isolated in the vast expanse of the South Pacific, over 2,000 miles from the nearest inhabited shore, lies one of the most remote and enigmatic places on Earth, Easter Island or Rapa Nui. Here, scattered across the grassy slopes of an extinct volcano, stand the silent, brooding giants known as the Moai. These are not merely statues, they are colossal monuments of volcanic stone, with nearly 900 of them gazing inland with a solemn, imposing presence that has captivated and confounded the world for centuries. The average Moai stands about 13 feet tall and weighs a staggering 14 tons, but the largest one ever erected, named Paro, towers at 33 feet and weighs an unbelievable 82 tons. How did a small, isolated Polynesian society, with a population that likely never exceeded 15,000 people, and with no access to metal or heavy machinery, quarry, transport, and raise these gigantic figures? This question forms the heart of one of archaeology's greatest logistical puzzles. The journey of a Moai began at the quarry of Rono-Roroku, the volcanic crater that served as the island's primary workshop. Even today, the mountain's interior is a haunting gallery of unfinished giants, with almost 400 statues in various stages of completion, still partially embedded in the bedrock. It's here we can see the process frozen in time, using hand-held stone picks made from a harder volcanic rock called basalt. Teams of master carvers would painstakingly chip away at the soft volcanic tuff, first freeing the front of the statue and then slowly working their way down the back, leaving a keel of rock attached until the very end. The level of artistry is astounding. The faces were given their distinctive features: long ears, strong brows, and sharp noses, while the stone was still in the quarry. Once a statue was fully freed from the cliff face, it was carefully slid down the outer slope using a system of ropes and levers, ready for its incredible journey across the island. For decades, the most widely accepted theory for how the Rapa Nui moved these multi-ton monoliths was the log rolling method. This idea proposed that the islanders would fell countless large trees to create a track of wooden rollers. The statue would be laid on its back on a sledge or wooden frame, and then pulled laboriously along this track, with teams constantly moving logs from the back to the front. This theory seemed to be supported by the island's tragic ecological history, which suggested the native palm forests had been completely cleared, partly for this very purpose, leading to a catastrophic environmental collapse and the downfall of the civilization itself. It was a compelling narrative of ecological hubris, a cautionary tale of a people who destroyed their own paradise to build their gods. However, a dramatic shift in this thinking began with a simple yet brilliant experiment. Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, along with a team including Rapa Nui descendants, proposed a radically different idea. What if the statues didn't lie down for their journey? What if they walked? Their theory, known as the walking method, suggests that the Moai were transported in an upright position, using 3 strong ropes, 1 tied to the statue's head to pull it forward, and 2 tied to the base to rock it from side to side and control its balance. A relatively small team could literally walk the giant statue across the landscape. In a stunning demonstration, an 18-person team successfully walked a full-sized concrete replica of a Moai for hundreds of feet. This method elegantly explains the many Moai found abandoned along ancient roads, toppled forward onto their faces, as if they had stumbled and fallen during transport, a fate far less likely if they were lying horizontally on a sledge. Beyond the incredible how of their transportation lies the even deeper question of why. The Moai were not standalone monuments. Each one was eventually placed upon a massive stone platform called an ahu, which served as a ceremonial altar and often a burial site for the community's ancestors. The prevailing understanding is that the Moai are not gods but deified representations of powerful ancestral chiefs. They were carved and erected to honor the memory and the mana, or spiritual power, of these important leaders. It's believed that their presence would watch over and protect the living descendants of their clan. The fact that almost all Moai face inland, turning their backs to the ocean, supports this idea. They are gazing protectively over the villages and lands of their people. This wasn't an act of vanity or ecological folly. It was the ultimate expression of a deep and complex ancestor worship culture, a spiritual endeavor that united entire communities in a shared, monumental purpose. The story of the Moai is ultimately a story of human ingenuity and resilience, not just one of collapse. While the island did face severe environmental challenges, the Rapa Nui people did not simply vanish. They adapted. The later period of their history saw a shift away from statue construction and the rise of the Birdman cult, a new religious tradition focused on an annual competition to collect the first sooty tern egg from a nearby islet. This cultural transformation shows a society finding new ways to structure its spiritual and political life. The Moai stand today not as tombstones for a failed culture, but as eternal monuments to a people of astonishing capability. They represent a triumph of collective will, a testament to what a community can achieve when united by a common faith and a shared vision, proving that even on the most remote island on Earth, human ambition can reach monumental heights. Deep within the lush river valleys and dense jungles of Costa Rica's Diquis Delta, a discovery was made that seemed to defy the very nature of handcrafted stonework. In the 1930s, as the United Fruit Company began clearing vast tracts of land for banana plantations, their bulldozers began to unearth something utterly unexpected. Large, perfectly spherical stone balls, some half buried in the earth, others lying in small groups as if deliberately placed. Ranging from a few centimeters to over 2.5 meters in diameter and weighing up to an astonishing 16 tons, these orbs were crafted with a precision that borders on the machine-made. Their surfaces are incredibly smooth, and their sphericity is so exact that for many, it seems impossible they were created by a pre-Columbian culture using only stone tools. Dating mainly from the period between 300 and 1500 years after the Common Era, these enigmatic artifacts, known as the stone spheres of Costa Rica or Los Bolas, present a mystery not of alien intervention, but of astonishing human skill and a purpose lost to the jungle. The first and most pressing question is how they were made. The primary material is a hard, igneous rock called gabbro, quarried from the nearby Talamanca Mountains. Other spheres were carved from coquina, a softer limestone-like material formed from ancient shellfish sediments. Archaeologists, through experimental replication, have pieced together a plausible and incredibly labor-intensive method. Craftsmen would first identify a suitable boulder and then use heat-building fires against the rock, and then dousing it with water to create thermal shock and fracture off large pieces. Once a rough shape was achieved, the meticulous process of pecking, grinding, and polishing began. They likely used stone hammers made of the same hard material to chip away at the form, then abraded the surface with sand and water, perhaps using leather or coarse textiles, slowly working it over generations into its final, breathtakingly perfect spherical form. The true marvel is the final precision. Researchers have measured these spheres and found their circumference to be near perfectly consistent. This suggests the sculptors didn't just have an expert eye. They likely employed sophisticated techniques, perhaps using hanging strings as plumb bobs or crafting wooden measuring frames to check their curvature, achieving a level of geometric understanding we rarely attribute to ancient cultures of the region. But the even greater mystery lies in their purpose. Why would a society invest such an immense amount of collective time and energy into creating hundreds of these perfect stone spheres? The most widely accepted theory is that they were potent status symbols. The larger and more perfect a sphere, the greater the wealth, power, and influence of the chieftain or clan that commissioned it. They were likely placed in prominent positions, lining the pathways to important public spaces or the homes of elites, serving as a clear, stone-built declaration of social standing. This theory is supported by the fact that many spheres were found arranged in patterns, particularly in key archaeological sites like Batumble and El Silencio. Some of these arrangements align with astronomical features. At El Silencio, the largest known sphere, measuring over 2.5 meters across, was found positioned in a way that may have been related to solar observations or celestial events, suggesting the spheres could have functioned as a kind of astronomical calendar or ritual landscape, connecting earthly power to the cycles of the cosmos. Sadly, many of these original alignments were destroyed when the spheres were moved by plantation workers in the 20th century, making it difficult to confirm their celestial significance. Local legends offer other fascinating, though unverifiable, explanations. Some myths claim the spheres were cannonballs fired by gods in great battles. Others say they are petrified seeds from a magical plant that could guarantee a plentiful harvest, or that they contain hidden treasure, leading to unfortunate instances of spheres being dynamited by treasure hunters. The most compelling and poignant theory, however, connects them to the spiritual world. In the belief systems of the indigenous Boruca people, descendants of the sphere makers, the circle is a sacred shape representing the universe, eternity, and perfection. The spheres might have been physical manifestations of this belief, conduits for spiritual energy, or talismans to protect the community. They could have been rolled in rituals, their motion symbolizing the movement of the sun or the planets. The ultimate tragedy of the stone spheres is their displacement, looting, and the casual relocation of these monuments by early plantation owners have stripped them of their primary context. We can see the spheres, but we can no longer see them in place, which is the key to understanding their true function. They are now national symbols of Costa Rica, displayed in government buildings, hospitals, and museums, revered but utterly disconnected from their original setting. This disconnection makes them a powerful metaphor for the fragility of cultural knowledge. We are left with the incredible, undeniable what the objects themselves, testaments to sublime skill and patience. But the why remains tantalizingly out of reach, buried not in the earth but in the silent passage of centuries. They stand as silent, perfect sentinels from a complex world we are still striving to hear, reminding us that some of the greatest human achievements are measured not in years but in the perfection of a circle. Imagine stumbling upon a seemingly bottomless pond in your village. A watery hole locals feared was an infinite abyss. In 1992, in the Chinese village of Xi'an, a curious farmer decided to pump the water out of just such a pond, expecting to find a small, natural pool. Instead, as the water level dropped, he revealed the entrance to an enormous, breathtakingly engineered underground world that had been completely hidden for centuries. This was the first of what we now call the Longyu Caves, a staggering complex of at least 24 hand-carved caverns buried deep within the limestone foothills of Zhejiang province. What makes them an archaeological impossibility is the sheer, almost incomprehensible scale of the undertaking. Each cave is a massive, standalone hall, with the largest covering an area of over 12,000 square meters and reaching heights of up to 30 meters. That's roughly the size of 2 football fields placed side by side and as tall as a 10-story building. And every single inch of this space was excavated by hand. The precision and artistry on display are what truly defy belief. These are not rough, haphazard holes in the ground. The walls, ceilings, and enormous supporting pillars are uniformly decorated with a series of parallel chisel marks, angled at a consistent 60 degrees. This isn't just for decoration. This specific pattern was a deliberate engineering choice to distribute stress and maximize the structural integrity of the caverns, preventing collapse over millennia. The chiseling is so methodical and uniform across all 24 caves that it points to a single master building plan executed with unwavering discipline. The surfaces are smooth, the corners are sharp, and the angles between walls, floors, and ceilings are precise to within a single degree. This is a feat that would be challenging today with modern laser-guided equipment, yet it was achieved over 2,000 years ago, during a period historians believe was the Western Han Dynasty, around 200 years before the Common Era. The volume of rock removed is estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters. To put that in perspective, if that rubble were used to build a standard 1 meter wide, 1 meter high wall, it would stretch for 1,000 kilometers. The labor involved is staggering, requiring the coordinated effort of thousands of workers for multiple generations, a project of national significance. And yet, there is not a single word about it in any historical record. This complete absence from the annals of Chinese history is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. A project of this monumental scale and sophistication would have required immense resources, funding from the imperial court, a massive workforce, architects, engineers, and foremen. Such an endeavor would have been recorded in meticulous detail in court documents, local gazettes, and perhaps even celebrated in poetry, but there is nothing. No mention, no legend, no folk tale, no reference in any text from any era. It is as if the entire project was conceived, executed, and then deliberately erased from human memory. This void has led to a wide range of theories attempting to explain the cave's purpose. The initial thought was that they were ancient tombs or burial chambers for emperors, but no artifacts, bodies, or funerary decorations were found inside. Others suggested they were quarries, but the careful, decorative finishing work goes far beyond what would be necessary for simply extracting stone. The precision also rules out a mining operation. A more compelling theory is that they were designed as massive underground reservoirs for water storage and flood control for the region. The area is prone to seasonal flooding from the nearby river, and the caves could have acted as a giant relief valve, collecting excess water during the rainy season and slowly releasing it during droughts. This would have been a visionary piece of civil engineering. However, even this practical explanation runs into problems. If they were meant to hold water, why go to the immense effort of carving every surface with such beautiful, intricate patterns? The chisel marks would serve no functional purpose for water containment. Furthermore, no channels or canals have been found connecting the caves to the river or to each other, which would be essential for such a system. The most enigmatic theory suggests a more symbolic purpose. Some researchers note that the layout and design of the caves, with their soaring ceilings and massive pillars, mimic ancient wooden architecture that has long since rotted away. They propose the caves were intended as a permanent, indestructible underground replica of a palace or a sacred space, a place for rituals that needed to exist outside of time, safe from the wars and fires that ravaged the surface world. Whatever their true purpose, the Longyu Caves stand as a silent, humbling monument to a forgotten chapter of human ambition. They are a powerful reminder that history is not just written on parchment, but carved into the very bones of the earth, and that some stories are so vast they remain hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years. Emerging from the mists of the Viking Age, a time we often picture through the lens of raiding longships and fierce warriors, comes an artifact of such refined technology that it seems to belong to another era entirely. These are the Ulfbert swords, and they represent a metallurgical miracle that has left historians and scientists utterly baffled. Imagine a Viking chieftain, his grip tight on the hilt of a weapon that feels less like a tool of war and more like an extension of his own arm. In a sea of ordinary, brittle iron blades that could shatter in the heat of battle, his sword is different. It is lighter, stronger, and impossibly flexible. It bears a name stamped into its blade for all to see, plus VLF, Bur plus T. This name wasn't just a brand, it was a promise of unparalleled quality, a signature that marked the owner as a warrior of immense status and the blade as a product of a science that simply should not have existed in 9th to 11th century Europe. The secret of the Ulfbert's superiority lies in its steel. While most European swords of the era were made from what is called bloomery iron, a crude and impure metal smelted in a simple furnace that left behind slag and other imperfections, the Ulfbert blades were crafted from what is known as crucible steel. This is a far more advanced process. To create it, raw iron ore would be melted in a small, enclosed clay pot, a crucible, at an incredibly high temperature, far beyond what typical Viking furnaces could achieve. This intense heat, often requiring a forced draft from bellows, allowed the impurities to separate from the molten metal and rise to the top where they could be skimmed off. The result was a cake of nearly pure, high-carbon steel. This carbon content, sitting at around 1.2 to 1.6%, is the magic ingredient. It gives the steel a remarkable combination of hardness and flexibility. A skilled blacksmith could then forge this steel into a blade that would hold a razor-sharp edge through countless battles, yet was so resilient it could be bent almost double without breaking. In an age of inferior weapons, an Ulfbert was the closest thing to invincibility. This presents the central, impossible question: how did the Vikings, or the Frankish smiths who likely forged them, acquire this knowledge and, more importantly, the raw material? The technology to produce such pure crucible steel on an industrial scale was completely absent from medieval Europe. It wouldn't become common there for another 800 years during the Industrial Revolution. The answer, it seems, lies not in the frosty fjords of Scandinavia, but along the legendary trade routes to the east. The most compelling theory points to the Islamic world, specifically the territories of the Abbasid Caliphate in modern-day Iran and Central Asia. There, metallurgists had perfected the art of creating crucible steel, which they called fulad, or later, when traded, Damascus steel. These ingots of pristine, high-carbon steel were a highly prized trade commodity, transported thousands of miles along the Volga trade routes that connected the Baltic Sea to the Caspian. Viking traders who established outposts as far east as Constantinople would have traded furs, amber, and slaves for these exotic steel ingots, which were then transported back to workshops in the Frankish Rhineland. There, master smiths operating under the Ulfbert name would have forged them into the legendary blades, stamping them with their prestigious trademark. This makes the Ulfbert not just a weapon, but a symbol of a vast, interconnected medieval world, a globalized product centuries before the term was ever coined. Naturally, such a prized object invites imitation, and the archaeological record shows a fascinating evolution of the brand. Of the roughly 170 swords found bearing the Ulfbert inscription, only a select few are made from the genuine, high-quality crucible steel. The others are cheaper copies, often with misspelled inscriptions like +VLF Bert Plus or +VLF Ber plus T, made from inferior iron and attempting to cash in on the legendary reputation of the original. This indicates that the Ulfbert name became so powerful, so synonymous with supreme quality, that it spawned one of history's first known cases of widespread brand counterfeiting. The true Ulfberts were likely the weapons of kings and legendary heroes, items of such immense value they were passed down through generations, their superior performance weaving them into the very fabric of myth and saga. They stand as a stunning contradiction to our image of the Vikings as mere barbarians. They were also sophisticated traders and consumers who recognized and demanded the highest technological quality available anywhere in the known world, willing to traverse continents to obtain it. The Ulfbert sword is a silent testament to a lost network of knowledge and commerce, a gleaming, sharp reminder that the Dark Ages were perhaps not so dark after all. High in the Bolivian Andes, at an altitude that steals the breath away, lies a site that challenges our very understanding of ancient construction. This is Puma Punku, part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, and it is a place where the stones themselves seem to defy logic. Unlike the colossal, monolithic blocks of Sacsayhuamán, the ruins here are a field of shattered anarchy, a sprawling jumble of massive, precision-cut sandstone and andesite blocks that look less like the remains of a temple and more like a divine game of pickup sticks scattered by a giant. But it is in this apparent chaos that the true genius and the profound mystery reveals itself. When you look closely at the individual pieces, you realize that these are not simple bricks. They are intricate, geometrically complex components that interlock with a machined precision so exact it feels utterly anachronistic. The stones of Puma Punku are famous for their H-shaped blocks, but that simple description doesn't do them justice. These blocks are not uniform. Each one is a unique piece of a massive, three-dimensional puzzle. They feature a stunning array of precision-cut notches, tabs, and recesses. Some have perfectly straight channels, only a few millimeters wide, carved with flawless consistency along their lengths. Others display dovetailed joints and complex angles that would be challenging to produce even with modern computer-controlled machinery. The most baffling examples are the blocks with perfectly drilled, conical holes that pierce the hard stone, holes so precise they appear to have been made with an industrial drill press, not a hand-held tool. The andesite used is exceptionally hard, rating a 7 on the Mohs scale, just below diamond. To work this material with such finesse would require tools made of diamonds or other abrasives harder than the stone itself. Yet no such tools have ever been found at the site or anywhere in the surrounding region. This level of precision is the core of the impossibility. The building blocks fit together so tightly that, in their original state, you allegedly couldn't slip a razor blade between the seams. This isn't just about aesthetic perfection, it's a critical engineering feature. The entire region is seismically active, and this interlocking, mortar-free construction technique is what gave the structure its legendary resilience, allowing it to flex and shift during earthquakes without collapsing. The question is, how did the Tiwanaku people, who flourished between 500 and 1,000 years after the Common Era, achieve this? Mainstream archaeology suggests they used a combination of learned techniques. They likely employed stone hammers for the initial rough shaping, and then progressed to laborious grinding and sanding with harder stones, sand, and water. This method, while incredibly time-consuming, could theoretically achieve the smooth surfaces. For the intricate cuts and holes, they might have used tubular drills, hollow reeds, or copper tubes spun with a bow drill, using abrasive sand as the cutting agent. This would explain the conical holes, as the drill would naturally wear and create a wider entry point. The process would have been one of immense patience, passed down through generations of master craftsmen. However, for many who study the site, the conventional explanation feels insufficient. The sheer volume of perfectly identical, modular blocks suggests a level of standardization that implies advanced planning and measurement. The geometric complexity of the cuts, with their perfect right angles and consistent depths, points to a sophisticated knowledge of mathematics and engineering principles. This has led to a more radical theory that the Tiwanaku possessed a form of lost technology. Some researchers propose they might have discovered a chemical compound derived from local plants that could temporarily soften the stone to a clay-like consistency, allowing them to mold it into these precise shapes. While there is no chemical evidence for this, proponents point to other ancient megalithic sites where stone appears to have been melted or shaped in ways that seem to defy conventional carving. Others look at the precise, almost laser-like cuts and wonder if the builders had access to a lost form of machinery or even advanced knowledge passed down from a much older and now vanished civilization. The purpose of Puma Punku adds another layer to the enigma. While often called a temple, its true function remains unknown. The name itself translates to the door of the Puma, but what that door led to is anyone's guess. The site's alignment with celestial bodies suggests an astronomical significance, perhaps acting as a calendar or a sacred space for observing the heavens. The incredible effort invested in its construction indicates it was a place of immense importance, the very heart of the Tiwanaku worldview. Yet, like so many great civilizations, the Tiwanaku eventually declined, their cities abandoned and their knowledge seemingly lost. The complex was likely destroyed by a cataclysmic event, perhaps a massive earthquake or a sudden shift in climate that disrupted their agricultural base, scattering the magnificent puzzle pieces of Puma Punku across the Altiplano. Today, the ruins stand as a silent, sobering challenge. They force us to confront the limits of our understanding and to humbly acknowledge that the ancient world may have held secrets of craftsmanship and engineering that we are only now, in our age of technology, beginning to fully appreciate. Buried beneath a quiet green field in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, lies a 5,000-year-old enigma that is so valuable and so vulnerable it was hidden away on purpose. This is the Cochno stone, a massive slab of sandstone measuring 42 feet by 26 feet, and its entire surface is a breathtaking canvas of ancient art. Discovered in 1887 by the Reverend James Harvey, the stone is densely carved with over 90 intricate symbols, the most famous of which are known as cup and ring marks. These are not random scratches, they are carefully pecked into the rock, featuring a central hemispherical depression. The cup, surrounded by concentric circles that are often bisected by a radial groove like a channel leading outwards. The patterns swirl and flow across the rock in a complex, seemingly organized manner, some isolated and others interconnected, creating a mesmerizing tapestry of grooves and circles that has been described as one of the finest examples of Neolithic or Bronze Age rock art in all of Europe. For nearly 80 years, the stone lay in the open, a local curiosity that was eventually surrounded by a housing estate. It became a canvas of a different sort, sadly vandalized with modern graffiti, its ancient symbols fading under a layer of painted names and dates. The sheer mystery of its purpose, however, only grew. What do these symbols mean? The most prominent theories point to the heavens. Some researchers, like the archaeologist Ludovic McClellan, who studied the stone in the 1930s, believed the carvings represented a cosmic map. He proposed that the intricate patterns charted the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, or perhaps even marked a catastrophic event like a solar eclipse, serving as a sophisticated astronomical calendar for its creators. This celestial interpretation is supported by the work of other researchers who see in the radiating lines and circles a symbolic representation of celestial bodies and their paths across the sky, a permanent observatory carved in stone. Other explanations are more grounded in ritual and spirituality. The cup and ring marks are found at sacred sites across Britain and Ireland, often associated with burials and ceremonial landscapes. They might symbolize portals to the underworld, representations of trance states achieved during shamanic rituals, or territorial markers for different clans. The grooves could signify pathways for channeling rainwater or other liquids during fertility rites, with the stone acting as a massive altar for ceremonies now completely lost to time. The stone's modern story took a dramatic turn in 1965. Faced with increasing vandalism and the inability to adequately protect the irreplaceable panel, a radical decision was made. Rather than see it further defaced, archaeologists, in agreement with local authorities, made the extraordinary choice to rebury it. They covered the entire stone with several feet of soil, intentionally hiding it from view to ensure its preservation for future generations who might have better technology and methods to study it without causing harm. This act itself is a profound archaeological statement, an admission that sometimes the greatest act of preservation is to simply walk away and let the earth itself be the guardian. For over 50 years, the Cochno stone slept beneath its grassy blanket, its secrets kept safe but out of reach, becoming the stuff of local legend. That changed in 2016 when a team from the University of Glasgow, armed with modern digital technology, embarked on a groundbreaking project. They carefully excavated the stone for a brief 3-week period, not to expose it permanently, but to laser scan and photograph every millimeter of its surface in meticulous detail. This process created a perfect, high-resolution digital twin of the entire slab, allowing researchers to study the carvings from every angle in a virtual space, free from the threats of weather and human interference. This digital resurrection has opened up new avenues of investigation, but it has not yet delivered a definitive answer. The highly detailed scans allow for precise measurements and the analysis of tool marks, perhaps helping to determine if the art was created in a single period or added to over centuries. Yet, the meaning of the symbols remains as elusive as ever. The Kochno stone stands as a powerful reminder of the limits of our understanding. It is a message from a distant past, written in a language of circles and cups that we can see but cannot yet read. Its reburial adds a unique, modern chapter to its 5,000-year story, a testament to our evolving relationship with the past. We are no longer just collectors of artifacts. We are their stewards, sometimes making the conscious choice to leave a mystery unsolved, protecting it not for our own curiosity, but for the wonder of generations yet to come. The stone is once again hidden, a silent, sleeping giant holding its secrets close, waiting for the day we finally learn to speak its language. Off the coast of Japan's westernmost island, Yonaguni, in water so clear it feels like flying, lies a discovery that blurs the line between natural wonder and ancient architecture. In 1986, a local diver seeking to observe hammerhead sharks was startled to find something far more unexpected: a series of massive, terraced formations that looked like a sunken city. These are the Yonaguni monument structures, a collection of sandstone platforms, towering monoliths, and what appear to be staircases, streets, and even a stadium, all resting under about 16 to 98 feet of ocean. The most iconic structure is a massive 5-layer platform that resembles a stepped pyramid, with incredibly sharp, straight edges and near-perfect right angles. Another striking feature is a pair of tall, hexagonal pillars that look like they were placed to support a ceiling, and a large, flat rock that has been nicknamed the Turtle for its distinct shape. To the untrained eye, and to many who have dived there, it looks unmistakably like the ruins of a forgotten civilization, a real-life Atlantis swallowed by the sea. The heart of the debate lies in determining whether these formations are a product of human hands or the patient, artistic work of nature. Those who argue for a human origin, led by the late marine geologist Professor Masaki Kimura, point to specific features that seem to defy natural explanation. They highlight the two flat, parallel faces of the monument that align almost exactly with magnetic north, a detail that feels like intentional orientation. They point to what appear to be perfectly carved star marks, precise right angles, and the sheer symmetry of the terraces. Professor Kimura even identified what he believed were quarry marks, carved characters, and a relief of a human face on one of the rocks. For proponents, the clincher is a formation they call the road, a long, flat pathway that seems to have been cleared of debris, leading directly to the main structure. The implication is staggering. If man-made, these structures would have to have been built when the area was above sea level, which was at the end of the last ice age over 10,000 years ago. This would push the timeline for advanced construction in Japan back by millennia, suggesting a sophisticated culture that predates any known in the region by thousands of years. Geologists, however, offer a more grounded, though no less fascinating, explanation. They argue that the Yonaguni formations are a spectacular example of natural sandstone weathering. The rock in this region is sandstone and mudstone, which naturally fractures along parallel planes due to tectonic stresses. The powerful currents in the area, along with the erosive force of waves before the sea level rose, could have exploited these natural joints and fractures, undercutting the rock and creating the sharp, angular features we see today. The famous steps could be the result of harder layers of rock eroding more slowly than softer ones, a common geological process that creates terraced landscapes all over the world. Skeptics like geologist Robert Schoch, who has dived at the site, acknowledge that the formations are remarkable but attribute their appearance to these natural forces. He and others note that the perfect 90-degree angles are not actually perfect upon close measurement, and that the carved features are more likely the result of biological erosion, where marine organisms exploit weak points in the rock. They argue that while the site is visually stunning, every feature can be explained without invoking human intervention. The debate is further complicated by the site's context. Unlike other sunken cities like Alexandria's Heracleion, no definitive human artifacts such as pottery, tools, or bones have been conclusively linked to the structures themselves. Any potential tool marks have been eroded away by thousands of years of ocean currents. The sea level rise that submerged this area was a global event, not a local catastrophe, meaning there is no specific legend or flood myth in Japanese lore that neatly corresponds to the sinking of Yonaguni. This lack of corroborating evidence is the biggest hurdle for the man-made theory. Yet the possibility remains tantalizing. The Ryukyu Islands, where Yonaguni is located, have evidence of human habitation going back 30,000 years. Is it so impossible that a group of ancient people could have carved structures from the living rock on a promontory that was, at the time, connected to a much larger landmass? Whether a magnificent geological fluke or the remnants of a lost chapter in human history, the Yonaguni monument serves as a powerful underwater Rorschach test. It challenges us to look at the world and question what is possible, reminding us that the deepest mysteries are often hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for the tides of understanding to shift. Leaving the sunken mysteries of Yonaguni behind, we now travel to the arid, unforgiving desert of northwestern China, where a discovery in the Tarim Basin would unravel a thread of human history so unexpected it forced a complete rewrite of the region's ancient past. The year was 1987, and Chinese archaeologists were working near the town of Urumqi when they made a find that would stop them in their tracks. In a barren, saline wasteland, they uncovered a series of graves, but it wasn't the graves themselves that were shocking, it was the people inside them. The bodies were incredibly well preserved by the dry, salty air, their skin, hair, and clothing intact, and they were utterly unlike anyone the archaeologists expected to find. These individuals had long, flowing brown and blonde hair, high noses, and deep-set eyes. They were unmistakably Caucasian. These were the Tarim mummies, and they were over 4,000 years old, a time when history told us this part of the world was exclusively the domain of East Asian peoples. The most famous of these mummies is known as the Beauty of Lulan. Discovered even earlier in 1978, she was a woman who had died in her 40s and was buried in a simple woolen cloak and leather shoes. Her features were so perfectly preserved that she looked as if she had just fallen asleep, her high cheekbones and long eyelashes still clearly visible. Another stunning find was the Chechen Man, a 2-meter-tall individual with a magnificent handlebar mustache, a felt hat, and fine wool clothing adorned with intricate patterns. Buried with him were 10 hats, suggesting a culture with a complex understanding of social status and perhaps even fashion. These weren't isolated cases. Hundreds of such mummies have been found, representing a whole population of people from the West who had made this remote corner of Asia their home millennia before the Silk Road was even a concept. The immediate and profound question was, who were they and how did they get there? The mummies date from between 2,000 and 1,800 years before the Common Era, a period when the great civilizations of Europe and the Near East were in their infancy. The prevailing theory, supported by genetic analysis, points to a group known as the Afanasivo culture. These were nomadic pastoralists from the steppes of what is now southern Siberia and the Black Sea region. It is believed they embarked on an epic eastward migration, traveling thousands of miles across treacherous mountain passes and vast deserts, bringing with them their cattle, their sheep, and their unique Indo-European language. They eventually settled in the Tarim Basin, a place that, while harsh, offered pockets of fertile land around desert oases where they could raise their animals and establish a life. Their material culture, preserved in stunning detail, reveals a sophisticated and adaptable people. They wore brightly colored, woven twill tunics and tartan-like leggings that show a clear technological and aesthetic link to contemporary cultures in Europe. They had felted wool caps and string skirts. They used wooden carts and wheels. Perhaps most importantly, they were not just passing through. They built a stable, thriving society that lasted for well over 1,000 years. They lived in small communities, herded sheep and cattle, and farmed wheat and millet, creating a unique oasis-based economy in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Their very presence shatters the long-held historical narrative that ancient China was an isolated civilization, developing in a vacuum until the Han Dynasty opened the Silk Road. Instead, it reveals that East and West were connected far earlier than anyone thought, through daring migrations across the inner Asian Sea of grass and sand. The fate of these mysterious Western people is as intriguing as their arrival. For centuries, they maintained their distinct genetic and cultural identity. Over time, however, the tide of history began to shift. Around the first millennium before the Common Era, new groups began to arrive in the region, Eastern groups speaking early forms of Tocharian and other languages. The genetic record shows a gradual mixing, a blending of Eastern and Western ancestry that eventually gave rise to the diverse populations of Central Asia we know today. The Caucasian mummies represent the first chapter of that story, the original settlers who carved out a life in the desert and unknowingly became a vital link between two worlds. They are a powerful testament to human mobility and resilience, proving that the ancient world was far more interconnected and far more surprising than our history books could ever have imagined. Rising from the red clay of Elbert County, Georgia, the monolithic structure stood for over 4 decades as one of America's most enigmatic modern mysteries. Erected under a shroud of secrecy in 1980, the Georgia Guidestones were not an ancient relic, but a contemporary monument built with the precision of a scientific instrument and the cryptic pronouncements of a prophetic text. Often dubbed America's Stonehenge, the Guidestones consisted of 6 massive slabs of granite, weighing over 110 tons in total. The centerpiece was 4 towering vertical stones, each 16 feet tall, flanking a central column and topped by a massive capstone. But it wasn't their size that captured the world's imagination. It was the message carved into them in 8 different languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. The inscriptions presented 10 guides or principles for humanity, but it was the first and most controversial directive that set the tone for decades of speculation. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. This single line, calling for a drastic reduction of the global population from its current billions, was a lightning rod for conspiracy theories. It was followed by other equally ambitious guides, such as Guide Reproduction Wisely, Improving Fitness and Diversity, Unite Humanity with a Living New Language, Rule Passion, Faith, Tradition, and All Things with Tempered Reason, and perhaps most poetically, Be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. The monument also functioned as a complex calendar and astronomical guide. A small hole drilled through the capstone allowed a beam of sunlight to pass through at noon each day, illuminating the central stone to indicate the day of the year. Notches and slots in the stones were aligned to track the sun's solstices and equinoxes, and even to frame the position of the North Star. The identity of the people behind this grand and puzzling project only deepened the mystery. The entire endeavor was commissioned by a man using the pseudonym R.C. Christian, who approached the Elberton Granite Finishing Company in 1979. He represented a small group of loyal Americans who wished to leave a message for future generations, Christian paid for the project upfront, provided detailed architectural plans, and insisted on complete anonymity. His chosen name was a tribute to the legendary founder of the Rosicrucian order, Christian Rosencreuz, a figure associated with esoteric knowledge and secret societies. This deliberate clue immediately sent researchers down a rabbit hole of occult speculation. Was R.C. Christian alone eccentric with a grand vision, or the representative of a shadowy group like the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati, or a secretive sect preparing for a global catastrophe? The lack of any verifiable identity made every theory, from the philosophical to the paranoid, seem equally plausible. For some, the guidestones were a well-intentioned, if stark, warning. They were a monument to rationalism, environmentalism, and long-term thinking, urging humanity to avoid overpopulation, ecological collapse, and tribalistic warfare. The call for a new global language echoed the goals of Esperanto advocates, and the emphasis on reason over blind faith appealed to secular humanists. Others, however, saw a far more sinister agenda. The population control directive was interpreted not as a suggestion for natural balance, but as a blueprint for genocide, a revealed plan by a global elite to cull the human herd. The astronomical features were seen not as a calendar, but as a tool for occult rituals. The choice of languages was analyzed for clues, with some noting the inclusion of Hebrew and the absence of Latin or Greek, seeing it as evidence of a specific theological bent. The monument became a pilgrimage site for both New Agers seeking enlightenment and for militia groups protesting what they saw as a symbol of tyranny. The mystery reached its abrupt and violent conclusion on the morning of July 6, 2022. In the early hours, a security camera captured a massive explosion that severely damaged one of the vertical slabs. Later that day, authorities, citing safety concerns, made the decision to demolish the entire structure. The investigation led to the identification of a suspect who released a manifesto echoing anti-NWO, or New World Order, sentiments and claiming the guidestones were evil and of the devil. While the physical monument was gone, its philosophical shadow only grew longer. The destruction did not end the debate. It merely transformed the guidestones from a tangible puzzle into a ghost of an idea. Were the guidestones a benevolent guidebook for a future dark age, a sinister ritual marker, or simply the expensive hobby of a very private and very peculiar individual? The void left by their absence ensures that the questions posed by R.C. Christian will echo far longer than the granite ever could. Far from the deserts of Egypt and the highlands of Peru, a modern-day archaeological drama has been unfolding in the heart of Europe, one that pits a passionate entrepreneur against the entire academic establishment. Our journey takes us to the town of Visoko in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where a cluster of tree-covered hills has become the center of an international firestorm. In 2005, an amateur archaeologist named Semir Osmanagic stood at the base of Visochka Hill and made a declaration that would change his life and the town forever. He wasn't looking at a hill, he claimed. He was looking at the largest pyramid on Earth, a structure he dubbed the Pyramid of the Sun, built by a lost civilization over 12,000 years ago. This bold claim and the subsequent discovery of what he said were several other pyramidal structures in the valley launched the phenomenon of the Bosnian pyramids, a story that is as much about the nature of evidence as it is about the past. Osmanagic and his team point to a series of tantalizing anomalies that, taken together, form the backbone of their argument. They highlight the hill's striking geometric shape, with 4 triangular sides that appear to align almost perfectly with the cardinal points north, south, east, and west, a feature seen in pyramids worldwide. Excavations on the slopes have uncovered what they claim is a paved surface made of engineered concrete blocks, a material far more sophisticated than the rough stone one would expect from a natural formation. Perhaps the most captivating discovery is the labyrinth of underground tunnels named Ravni tunnels that weave beneath the valley. Inside, they have removed tons of artificial fill material to reveal massive, man-made looking megaliths and an alleged energy phenomenon. Constant beams of ultrasound energy emanating from the pyramids and converging at certain points within the tunnel system. For supporters and the hundreds of thousands of tourists who have visited, this is irrefutable proof of an advanced, ancient culture whose history has been completely erased. The global geological and archaeological community, however, has responded with near-universal and vehement dismissal. After examining the site, experts from the European Association of Archaeologists issued a statement calling the pyramid claims a cruel hoax and a complete absurdity. Their explanation is far less sensational but grounded in well-understood geological processes. The hills, they say, are entirely natural formations known as flatirons, a common shape for hills where layers of resistant rock and softer clay have been tilted and then eroded over millions of years. The paved concrete blocks are nothing more than naturally fractured conglomerate sandstone, a type of rock that naturally breaks into polygonal blocks due to tectonic stresses and weathering. The cardinal alignments, they argue, are a coincidence, a trick of perspective on a large landmass. As for the tunnels, geologists concede they are real but identify them as natural tectonic fractures or perhaps old medieval mining tunnels that have been misinterpreted and heavily modified by Osmanagic's team in their excavation efforts. This clash has created a fascinating and often acrimonious divide. Mainstream scientists accuse Osmanagic of poor methodology, of cherry-picking data that fits his narrative while ignoring overwhelming evidence to the contrary. They argue that his excavations are damaging genuine medieval and Roman archaeological sites located on the hills. Osmanagic and his supporters, in turn, accuse the academic establishment of being closed-minded, of refusing to investigate because the discovery doesn't fit their rigid, conventional timeline of human history. They see themselves as brave pioneers challenging a stagnant orthodoxy, much like the early detractors of Heinrich Schliemann who laughed at his belief in a real city of Troy. The debate has even spilled over into the realm of national identity, with some in Bosnia embracing the pyramids as a source of immense pride and a symbol of their country's previously unrecognized ancient importance, while others see it as an international embarrassment. Regardless of their ultimate origin, the pyramids have undeniably transformed Visoko. What was once a quiet, post-industrial town has become a booming tourist destination, with shops selling pyramid souvenirs, hotels catering to international visitors, and a constant stream of volunteers who pay to work on the excavations. This economic miracle underscores the powerful allure of such mysteries. For the public, the idea of a hidden, glorious past is often far more compelling than a complex geological explanation. The story of the Bosnian pyramids is therefore about more than just rocks and tunnels. It is a powerful case study in how archaeology intersects with myth, national identity, and the human desire to find wonder and meaning in the landscape. It forces us to ask where the line lies between healthy skepticism and dogmatic rejection, and whether some mysteries, even if eventually explained by science, can still capture our imagination and change a community forever. Now we travel to the sun-drenched islands of Malta, where etched into the very bedrock is a mystery that has perplexed scholars for centuries. Scattered across the limestone landscape, particularly concentrated at a place called Misra il Khaber, are the enigmatic cart ruts of Malta. These are not faint scratches, but deep, parallel grooves carved directly into the rock, sometimes plunging to depths of over 2 feet. They stretch for hundreds of yards, crisscrossing the terrain in a bewildering, tangled network that climbs hills, descends into valleys, and even disappears off cliffs into the Mediterranean Sea. Their age is itself a subject of debate, but they are widely believed to have been created by the same incredible temple-building culture that erected Malta's megalithic wonders like Haga Kim and Mnajdra, placing their origin somewhere between 4,000 and 2,500 years ago. The most immediate and logical theory is right there in the name. These were tracks for carts. The idea is that wooden-wheeled vehicles, perhaps drawn by animals, would have worn these deep grooves into the soft limestone over generations as they transported massive stone blocks for temple construction, agricultural goods, or other heavy cargo. This would explain the parallel nature of the ruts and their consistent gauge, the distance between them, which is often similar to the width of a standard cart. Yet, this seemingly straightforward explanation quickly runs into trouble when you look closer. Many of the ruts run in perfectly parallel lines only to suddenly diverge or converge for no apparent reason. Some run directly off steep cliffs, which would be a suicidal route for any cart driver. Furthermore, if they were formed by the relentless grinding of wooden wheels, why is there a complete absence of any wear marks or scratches on the sides of the grooves? The edges remain sharp and well-defined, suggesting they were carved intentionally with tools, not worn down slowly by traffic. This has led to a fascinating array of alternative theories. Some researchers propose they were part of a sophisticated irrigation system, channels designed to collect and direct precious rainwater to fields or storage cisterns. However, their intricate, often illogical pathways and their frequent ascent up slopes make this difficult to sustain. A more whimsical idea suggests they were used for a form of ancient slide, where heavy objects were placed on rollers and slid along these greased grooves, but this doesn't account for the complex junctions and turns. The most alluring and radical theories push the boundaries of imagination. Could they be the remnants of a prehistoric railway system, a concept so advanced it feels utterly out of place? Or perhaps they are astronomical alignments, their trajectories marking celestial events, though their tangled web makes this seem chaotic rather than calculated. The true genius of the cart ruts, and the source of their enduring mystery, lies in their sheer irrationality from a modern perspective. They refuse to conform to our logical expectations of what a transportation network should look like. This very defiance suggests that their purpose was born from a worldview and a set of priorities we no longer understand. They might represent a system that integrated ritual, utility, and land management in a way that is completely alien to us. Perhaps the journey along these tracks was as important as the destination, following sacred paths dictated by the stars or the contours of the land goddess worshipped by the temple builders. Walking among them today is a uniquely humbling experience. You are not looking at a ruined wall or a buried artifact. You are walking atop a fossilized thought process, a permanent mark left by a people who solved the problems of their world in a way we can barely even conceive. The grooves remain silent and profound, a labyrinth without a map, challenging us to understand that the past is not just a foreign country, but an entirely different universe of thought. Hidden deep within the lush, green highlands of northern Laos lies a landscape that feels less like a product of nature and more like the workshop of forgotten giants. This is the Plain of Jars, a vast archaeological zone where thousands of colossal stone vessels, some standing over 3 meters tall and weighing several tons, are scattered across dozens of sites in a haunting, silent congregation. Carved from solid sandstone and granite during the Iron Age, sometime between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these jars have stood for millennia, their original purpose a riddle wrapped in the mists of time and war. The most widely accepted theory, championed by early French archaeologist Madeleine Colony in the 1930s, points to a complex funerary practice. Excavations around the jars have uncovered human remains, ceramic grave goods, and glass beads, suggesting they were used as primary burial urns or perhaps as containers for a secondary burial process, where the deceased would be exposed to the elements until only the bones remained, which would then be carefully placed inside the jars for their final rest. This practice connects the jars to similar traditions found in other parts of Southeast Asia and even in ancient texts, painting a picture of a culture with profound beliefs about death and the afterlife, who went to incredible lengths to honor their dead with these enduring stone sentinels. Yet the true mystery of the Plain of Jars is not just archaeological. It is a stark and sobering reminder of a much more recent and far more deadly chapter in human history. During the secret war of the 1960s and 70s, Laos became the most heavily bombed nation per capita in history. American forces, aiming to disrupt supply lines along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, dropped over 2 million tons of ordnance on the country. A significant portion of these bombs, particularly cluster munitions, did not detonate on impact. Today, an estimated 80 million of these unexploded bombs, or UXO, remain scattered across the Lao countryside, and the jar sites are tragically no exception. This has made the simple act of archaeological investigation one of the most dangerous jobs on Earth. Before any excavation can begin, highly specialized teams from organizations like AMEGI, Mines Advisory Group, must meticulously clear the area inch by painstaking inch. The work is slow, perilous, and heartbreakingly necessary, creating a surreal reality where the quest to understand an ancient death ritual is perpetually threatened by the lethal remnants of modern warfare. This ongoing clearance effort adds a profound layer of respect and solemnity to the site, transforming it from a mere historical curiosity into a powerful symbol of resilience and the urgent need for peace. For the local Lao communities, the jars are woven into the fabric of their cultural identity and folklore, transcending their archaeological function. Local legends offer enchanting alternative origins for the megaliths. One popular tale speaks of a race of giants who inhabited the highlands, and the jars were created to brew vast quantities of rice beer or lao lao to celebrate a great military victory. Another story tells of a powerful king named Kun Cheung, who, after a long and successful campaign, ordered the jars to be made to hold rice wine for a monumental feast to honor his subjects. These stories, passed down through generations, are not seen as literal truths but as vital cultural narratives that connect present-day communities to their landscape and its ancient mysteries. The jars are not just relics to be studied, they are landmarks, spiritual waypoints, and a source of local pride. This deep cultural significance is why the ongoing work to clear the sites of UXO is so crucial. It is not only about preserving history, but also about safely restoring these sacred spaces to the people for whom they hold enduring meaning, allowing for rituals, tourism, and the simple, safe passage of daily life to return to the plains. The jars stand as silent witnesses to both the creative and destructive capacities of humanity, a duality that makes them one of the most poignant and powerful impossible discoveries on our list. While the megaliths of Laos stand as silent, poignant monuments to both ancient ritual and modern conflict, our next discovery takes us to a find that is anything but silent in its visual impact, a collection of artifacts so bizarre and so sophisticated they seem to have emerged from a dream. In the spring of 1986, a group of Chinese workers were digging a clay pit for bricks near the town of Guanghan in Sichuan province. Their shovels struck not more earth but something hard and metallic. What they unearthed would rip up the established narrative of early Chinese civilization and introduce the world to a culture so strange and advanced it was almost unbelievable. This was the first of 2 sacrificial pits at Sacsayhuamán, and inside was a treasure trove unlike anything ever seen before. The contents of these pits, dating back over 3,200 years to around 1,200 years before the Common Era, were a breathtaking departure from anything known in the ancient Chinese world. There were no inscribed oracle bones, no classic ritual vessels like those of the contemporaneous Shang dynasty to the north. Instead, the workers and then archaeologists pulled forth a gallery of surreal and awe-inspiring figures. There were enormous, fantastical bronze masks with bulging, tubular eyes that protruded several inches from the face, some with gilded coverings. There were towering, slender bronze figures, one standing an incredible 8 feet 4 inches tall atop a ceremonial base, dressed in an elaborate robe and holding his hands in a mysterious cupped gesture as if he once carried something immensely important. There were bronze trees, one nearly 13 feet high, with birds perched on branches and strange fruit dangling down. There were life-sized human heads made of bronze, each with a unique expression and elaborate hairstyle, some covered in gold foil. And everywhere there was a scepter, a life-sized mask, and other ritual objects of stunning workmanship. The artistic style is what makes Sacsayhuamán an absolute anomaly. This is not the artistic language of the Shang, which was more grounded in realistic animal motifs and human forms. The art of Sacsayhuamán is angular, exaggerated, and profoundly mystical. The giant eyes and ears on the masks and heads are not deformities. They are almost certainly intentional symbols, perhaps representing a deity with supernaturally enhanced senses of sight and hearing, an all-seeing, all-knowing figure. The culture that produced these objects, now known as the Shu, clearly possessed a radically different cosmology and a visual language completely unique in the ancient world. Their artisans had mastered bronze casting on a monumental scale, using piece mold techniques to create objects of a size and complexity that rivaled and even surpassed their northern contemporaries. Yet for all their technical prowess, they left behind no writing, no royal tombs, and no direct historical mention in any contemporary records. They are a civilization that achieved breathtaking artistic and technological heights and then vanished into silence, known only through the offerings they left in these two earth-filled crypts. The discovery forced a dramatic re-evaluation of ancient Chinese history. For a long time, the narrative was one of a single, centralized cultural hearth in the Yellow River Valley, from which Chinese civilization spread outward. The Shang dynasty was seen as the primary, superior source of culture and technology. Sacsayhuamán shattered that monolithic view. It proved that during the very same period, in the fertile Sichuan Basin far to the southwest, a completely independent and equally sophisticated civilization was flourishing. China was not a single, emerging culture, but a land of multiple, competing, and interacting centers of advanced civilization, each with its own unique beliefs, art, and political structure. The Shu culture of Sacsayhuamán was a peer to the Shang, not a peripheral imitator. Their existence rewrites the map of early China, transforming it from a story of a single river valley into a tapestry of diverse and powerful kingdoms. The greatest mystery of Sacsayhuamán is its disappearance. Around 1100 or 1000 years before the Common Era, this vibrant, creative culture seems to have vanished. The two pits themselves are part of the mystery. They are not tombs, but carefully arranged collections of valuables that were deliberately broken, burned, and buried in a single cataclysmic event. This suggests a massive ritual termination, perhaps a response to an existential crisis. Was it a devastating earthquake that altered the course of nearby rivers? A sudden invasion by a rival power, an internal revolt that led to the systematic destruction of the old religious order? We may never know for certain. What we are left with is their art, a haunting, powerful, and alien legacy that speaks of a world of gods and rituals we can barely comprehend. The figures from the pits now reside in a magnificent museum, their oversized eyes staring out at modern visitors, not with hostility, but with a silent, profound challenge, daring us to understand the mind of the people who dared to imagine them. While the surreal bronze masks of Sacsayhuamán reflect a complex, ritualistic worldview, our final discovery takes us to a site that is far more visceral and stark, revealing a deep, ancient preoccupation with the human body itself, specifically what happens to us after death. Travel now to the banks of the Motala River in Sweden, to a place known as Canal Jordan. Here, around 8,000 years ago, at a time when humans in Scandinavia were still hunter-gatherers living in the Mesolithic era, a community constructed a unique and grisly monument at the bottom of a shallow lake. This wasn't a burial site in the traditional sense. It wasn't about laying bodies to rest. Instead, it was a carefully arranged display of the dead, a ritual that continues to send shivers down the spines of archaeologists today. Unearthed during a routine archaeological survey prior to a construction project in 2009, the site initially appeared to be a stone pavement on the lake bed. But as excavators carefully worked, they made a heart-stopping discovery. Embedded in the clay around and above the stones were human skulls, but these weren't just scattered bones, they were mounted. 11 skulls were found, and at least 2 of them were still impaled upon sharpened wooden stakes that had been driven straight through the base of the cranium from the bottom up. These stakes would have been used to display the skulls, holding them aloft for all to see at the water's edge. The arrangement was deliberate and communal. The skulls were placed in a tight cluster at the center of the stone platform, creating a macabre tableau that had been intentionally sunk into the lake and preserved for millennia in the oxygen-poor sediment. Forensic analysis of the skulls reveals a story far more complex and intimate than a simple trophy display from a raid. The group included both men and women, ranging from young adults to middle age. The real shock, however, came from the injuries. Nearly all of the skulls showed evidence of severe trauma, but crucially, these wounds showed signs of healing. These were not the killing blows. These individuals had been struck hard on the head, likely with blunt weapons, years before they died, and they had survived long enough for the bone to begin repairing itself. This changes the entire narrative. These weren't necessarily enemies killed in combat. They might have been people from within the community itself, individuals who had lived for years bearing the marks of a violent encounter. Furthermore, one of the skulls, that of an older woman, even had a piece of another person's skull inserted into her own head wound, a practice that suggests an attempt at primitive surgery or, more likely, a deeply symbolic act performed after her death. The treatment of the bodies after death adds another layer of eerie ritual. The skeletons were incomplete, only the skulls and a few other select bones were present at the site. This tells us that these individuals were not buried whole. Their bodies were processed elsewhere. The heads were carefully removed, the flesh likely cleaned from the skulls, and only then were they brought to this special lakeside repository. The stakes were then meticulously inserted, a technically difficult task that required precise knowledge to avoid shattering the bone. This wasn't a haphazard act of violence. It was a ceremonial procedure carried out with purpose and care by people who knew exactly what they were doing. So what does this tell us about Mesolithic beliefs? The location is key. Placing the skulls in a lake, a liminal space between the world of the land and the world of the water, suggests a deep spiritual connection to the landscape. Water was often seen as a boundary to the afterlife or a home to powerful deities. By sinking this monument into the lake, the community may have been attempting to communicate with those forces, to seek protection, or to ensure the spirits of these specific individuals remained in their rightful place. The fact that the victims of violence were chosen for this rite implies that their deaths or their lived experiences of trauma held a particular significance. Perhaps they were seen as imbued with power, or maybe this was a way to contain potentially vengeful or troubled spirits. The tomb of the sunken skulls doesn't give us easy answers, but it provides a stunningly clear window into the mind of our ancient ancestors. It reveals a society capable of great violence, but also one with a complex symbolic life, a people who grappled with death, memory, and the afterlife in a way that was both brutal and profoundly meaningful. It stands as a stark, unforgettable reminder that the human preoccupation with mortality and the rituals we build around it is as ancient as humanity.